And the girls' running to
Okay, I'd like to call up the committee meetings to order, and if we could please stand and salute the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Joan, you have the roll recorded. I'll turn it over at this point to Mr. Ryder.
The Academics Committee meeting tonight, Dr. Roberts wanted to cut on flexible scheduling. Obviously, as a board, we need several new people who are trying to learn this. So this is more of an informational presentation. But I think as a board, we really need to start looking at this and making some decisions ASAP. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Roberts. Thank you.
I would actually let Mike start with the presentation.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dr. Roberts did a presentation for all of you folks last month. And during that presentation, she articulated quite a bit about our intervention structure. At that time, we decided it was probably best to spend a little bit more time to afford you folks the opportunity to do a little Q&A about some of the specifics in the schedule. So what I have basically here for you tonight in terms of a presentation is an overview of the entire process. Ms. Cassis is going to hand out to you some specific answers to questions that were relayed from the superintendent. Some of those questions will be answered during the course of the presentation. The other ones are in writing, and you can share those or ask for elaboration on those questions throughout the presentation or closer to the end when we do a little bit of Q&A. Really, what this is about, I don't know if you can hit the first slide, is basically 4 essential questions. And those 4 essential questions are, number 1, why are we recommending a schedule change? What's currently wrong with our schedule that we would ask to change this particular schedule? Why we are selecting this particular model in particular? And what does the schedule look like for both our students and our teachers to make sure that that is clarified? And the last, of course, goes through those intricate questions about what happens next. And so there's a brief slide, and I can answer any questions about moving forward in terms of what is our action plan for this flexible schedule. So the need for change. One of the things that I made sure the board members had available to them was the previous presentations that were presented. It's very important that you have those available to you because the start of this process wasn't Dr. McGinley, it wasn't Dr. Roberts, it wasn't the Director of Teaching and Learning, Mr. First. It didn't come from Mr. Schiffert or Ms. Cassis. A committee was brought together to study our current schedule, review possible alternatives, and then to follow up on those alternatives to see if they would come to fruition in terms of meeting the needs of that particular committee. As has been stated in the past, there are various stakeholders that had a hand on this particular committee. PTSA, parent representatives, so on and so forth, dating back to the 2009-2010 school year. At that time, we also hired Dr. Reddick, who is probably one of the foremost leading experts regarding block scheduling and scheduling in general across the world, not just in our country. Dr. Reddick worked with our committee to come up with possible alternatives to our current schedule. But before doing that, we listed very specifically what we thoroughly enjoyed or what made academic success for our students in the 9-period day that we currently have before moving on to look at other options. hot now. I think I'm nervous. I don't know why. But, looking at some of these needs to this process, it's very important that that is understood. We then followed up with some investigations, which I have some slides on later in the presentation, where we called schools who had similar type schedules to get the lowdown on whether or not they were successful. What are the ins and outs? What do we need to do to build our schedule? From those investigations, we drafted a schedule that meets our initial goals. Not a schedule that mirrors Nazareth, not a schedule that mirrors St. Joseph's Academy, not a schedule that mirrors anyone in our area, but a schedule that is unique to Easton Area High School and suits the needs of our specific population of students and the various diversities. What we're looking at is a schedule that provides all students with opportunities for sustained learning, that increases our flexibility to provide interventions, not just in an IE period or direct study period, but also within an extended period of time, where skills could be taught, remediated in and during that block of time, where you don't have that ability in 42 minutes, you do within the 80 that we presented. Reducing the frequency and amount of time that our students are in transitions, and that means not only the amount of time that they spend walking the hallways, but the amount of time in each day that they go from one class to the next class, to the next class, to the next class, so on and so forth. 8 times of the day, our students are moving in the hallway at 5-minute intervals, for a total of 40 minutes per day that they're walking around our hallways. We wanted to also reduce the teacher and student load. Right now, our students can take up to 8 courses if they decide to have a lunch. In that schedule, that's 8 different subject matters that a student can focus on. Some of our students excel with 8 subject matters, and they even take 9. But some of our students struggle with that requirement of having to maintain 6 subject matters and 7 subject matters at any given time. So those are the things that we're trying to reduce. With the teacher load, right now our teachers are teaching 6 according to contract. They will teach 6 with the new schedule, or the proposed route. The issue with 6 isn't necessarily 6 teaching periods, but it's the fact that you could have anywhere from 25 students to 30 students, and maybe sometimes smaller, but that adds up to over 120 to 135 students every day that you see. You have to grade for. You have to meet their individual needs, and we focus on differentiation. That's a lot of needs. If you split those, you have more time of sustained learning with 90 days of instruction with those students, and that number is literally cut in half. So that teacher deals with 60 students for 90 days and 60 students for 90 days versus 120 for 180 days. We have a diverse population of students, many of those with needs. Some of those needs are difficult to meet when you have 30 on your caseload at any one given time. Students with IEPs have specially designed instruction. A teacher can have anywhere from 18 to 20 different specially designed instructions for students on their caseload. It is law, they must follow. Reducing some of that workload will allow our teachers to excel and meet the individual needs of our students. Providing more time for project-based learning. Right now there's a lot of recall and comprehension happening in our classrooms. We don't have enough application, synthesis, analysis taking place because of that 40-minute block of instruction. Skills are taught, there might be some application, the next day more skills or knowledge is taught, and there's very little application that's taking place because that amount of time is very limited. Those options are fewer in between than they would be if you had this other design. Providing more time for integration of technology. Right now, the start and breakdown of a typical 41-minute class period when you're utilizing technology can take anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes. That's 8 minutes deducted from a 41-minute class period, and that's time deducted from opportunities for learning. As we move forward, students will be equipped with these electronic devices and more so utilizing those, and we need to meet those needs. It's very difficult to do that now in 41 minutes. This will allow for some more technology to be integrated into our curriculum. Now, the investigations. A lot of questions that come about is research. Mike, what does the research say? Well, in terms of the research, we're looking at conclusions. Those conclusions are made on specific school systems and specific school structures. It's very difficult to take those conclusions and attach them to the idea of a schedule, because it doesn't matter what the structure is. It matters what happens inside of the structure that matters. So most of these investigations and most of these conclusions that are drawn specifically point to best practices. If you're going to a block, you should do this. And those best practices are things that we are focusing our professional development on. Having teachers prepared, making sure the curriculum guides there are prepared, making sure teachers have access to a 3-part lesson plan that doesn't force them to do some direct instruction for an extended period of time when we know that teenage mind is really captured for 20-minute intervals. So we're looking at the pedagogy and we're ensuring that from here on out till we begin this schedule that our teachers are prepared to do that. What these investigations did, they were phone calls to these principals of these high schools and other high schools. These in particular that focused on a set of questions. That set of questions extracted this checklist. And this checklist just so happens to be a direct comparison to what our goals were as a committee. So does that Bangor, Nazareth, St. Mary's, Pocono Mountain schedule improve opportunities for common planning? Does it address staffing efficiencies? Does it increase intervention time? Does it lower the pace and amount of transitions? Is there more time to develop work in project-based learning? Is there opportunity to take advantage of community-based opportunities? And as we looked at those, we looked at what their schedules didn't have, and we tried to build it into ours, keeping the hybrid or the flexible nature of what we set out to accomplish. That's why our proposed schedule has a combination of courses that meet for 90 days for a semester, and that meet A/B for a full year for those areas that we feel need to be done that way. We also have the ability to fit electives in an A/B fashion to make sure that students have the full complement and opportunities that they currently have with 8 selections and 8 options. The other piece that's very crucial to understand is that we had to do this without an increase in staff. And we have to do this without a decrease in staff as well. So looking at those 8 options for our students, they are still available. And our teachers are teaching their full load in the contract. In addition to that, we are adding a direct study period to be able to catch those students along the way so we don't have to remediate after the fact. Here is the recommended schedule. Right now, we're looking at those time periods. They're pretty much blocked off. There might be some slight changes in those to build in a homeroom period and things of that nature. But what this was created was to show a crossover from what we currently have to what is proposed for next year. We obviously will work on the exact minutes, but this is a pretty tentative sketch of what that's going to look like with 5 blocks. What's important to understand is that 4 of those blocks of time, students will be in an instructional class. 1 of those blocks will be split with a lunch and a direct study period that will be determined by what the student needs are at that point in time. It also gives opportunities for us to do things that we're currently pulling students out of instructional time to accomplish. There's a whole litany of things that fall into that particular category. One of the things that we're also working towards is to ensure that our guidance curriculum is implemented for all of our students at the high school. That is a difficult task to accomplish when you have to pull kids out of instructional time. Counselors are working very hard not to do that, so they're looking at study halls to have those types of conversations. This direct study time would provide opportunities for both the guidance department and our nurses to have these sort of meetings with students in smaller group settings without distracting from instructional time. So those things are what we're working on right now as a school to delineate. What do those 180 40-minute blocks of time look like for a 9th grader? What do they look like specifically for a 10th, 11th, and 12th grader? And and getting even more particular, what does it look like for the individual 9th grader who has a reading need, who has a math need, who needs to see their CP biology teacher about a lesson that they missed, and those sort of items that crop up every day. Right now at the high school, one of the difficulties that we are experiencing is we have one math teacher and one English teacher assigned to the library per period to meet the needs of 2,800 students. It is impossible. The other factor is those are the first 2 teachers that get pulled for coverage when we don't have enough subs for that particular day. Oftentimes you will see those teachers being pulled and that lab being closed for her student who needs to get down there for numerous subject matters, including Algebra 2 or CP Pre-Calculus. So it's not just your student who is struggling academically, but also students who need that time to meet with the teacher. This direct study will allow those opportunities for all students, regardless of level. A student schedule. What we have here is a 9th grader. Just as an example, what the student has is physical education for A day for first semester, and B day they have band. Band will be a full year for this particular student. It will be every B day for the entire year. The second half of the school year, they'll be able to take a culinary elective. So for that block 1 period of time, that student will have 2 credits. Right now, if the student takes a full year course for block 1 and 2, or period 1 and 2, they will have 2 credits. It's equivalent. Period 2. What I've integrated into this schedule that was different from previous presentations was the concern and the interest to have math be AB. College Prep Algebra 1 for a typical 9th grader would meet every other day for 180 days. And on B day, we've already agreed with, in conjunction or with meeting with the foreign language department, that foreign language would also meet on an AB schedule. I will express my concern sometimes with going to lots of AB schedules is because you lose that student load and you lose that teacher load. The more AB you have, the more classes the student has to focus on, the more students the teacher has at one given time. But it does work, and we are moving forward with that particular part of the schedule. Lunch will be the first part of block 3. Directed study will be the second. What's also important to note there as well is that we will only have one group of students leaving cafeteria, one group of students entering the cafeteria. Right now you have 4 grade levels of students coming from 5 or 6 different directions all at one time, coming towards the cafeteria and leaving the cafeteria, and it is quite a scene. It's very interesting to see on a daily basis. So one of the things that this allows us to do logistically as well is we have one group moving, all headed to the B section, maybe sprinklings in other areas for elective courses, and then they're back in with the 10th grade. 10th grade sprinkles down to their hallway area, the D and E area, and then maybe off to some electives, but it also cuts down on that transition. Right now, 4 periods a day, we have roughly 600, 700 students moving in the hallways, and it can be distracting in certain areas of the building because we need to get the kids out of the cafeteria prior to the bell ringing to move the other ones into the cafeteria, because the great design of our high school cafeteria is there's one way in and there's one way out. Period 4, Earth and Space Science and U.S. History. Those are semester-based courses. First half of the year, Earth and Space. Second half of the year, History. Period 5, that youngster will have CP Lit Comp, and to complement that second semester, have Art 1. If you count up this particular youngster's schedule, they will have the ability to have 8 classes, therefore maintaining 8 credits. What's different is now this youngster has the ability to have a directed study every day for 180 days. So if they ever have a problem in one of these courses, there'll be assistance available. Concerns, Mr. Cuck, if a kid misses Earth Space Science and it's 80 minutes, they're missing 2 days. You're right. But they have a direct study to get some assistance for that lost time. When a student misses 1 day now, they're missing 7 or 8 subject matters in that day. So it pretty much balances out so much in terms of equivalent, because that is a concern that I've also heard and others say, well, Mr. Cuck, in a block, if a kid misses 1 day of school, that's 2 days of class. Well, if your son misses or daughter misses 1 day of school, they're missing 7 or 8 classes. And here, the student would be missing 4. It's equivalent. Mathematically, it comes out. It's the same. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Talking about teacher load. This is an example of a history teacher. Right now, a history teacher would have 6 classes of students. In the proposed schedule, the teacher would have 3 classes of students. Anywhere from 20 to 30 students, as I mentioned before, depending on the level that teacher would have. You look at 120 students versus 60 students for any one given time. The focus was reducing teacher load, reducing student load. Important, the committee set that out as a goal, and that's what we tried to accomplish. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to have Ms. Cassis pass out to you some sample schedules. What I tried to do here was to provide you with what the mock schedule, which is, I'm going to go over right now, which is proving the concept. And then the second part to that schedule is the schedule that the student currently has. And I wanted to make sure you had that to see the comparison, that these are the same requests. So one of the areas of preparation was for us to prove the concept. So we say we're going to have this schedule, how does it work? And we spent some significant amount of time making sure that it works. So when you look at these particular schedules, the first one on your list, or in front of you, is a 9th grade student. And I crossed out their names so we don't, Johnny doesn't know what their schedule looks like in a block yet. We'll show it to him soon enough. But there's Honors Earth and Space Science, Accounting 1, PE 9, Spanish 2, their lunch study, of course, Honors Earth and Space Science with their lab, Geometry, Lit Comp, and U.S. History. The second part is the current schedule that the student has. So this is an example of what a 9th grader would have. The courses are the same. I know one of the questions was about the course selection guide. Because our students have the same amount of options, what doesn't change is the course offerings. What changes is the timing in which they meet. The credits remain the same as well. The second schedule is an example of a 10th grader. In addition to that is an example of a CIT student. The CIT student currently leaves us at the conclusion of period 4 and goes to CIT and spends some time in transition up there. And they come back to us if they are an AM CIT student at the conclusion of period 6. In this proposed schedule, the student would then have 2 blocks at the end of the day for their core courses, just like they have 4 periods in our current schedule. What is shown there is right now a scheduling issue that will have to be resolved for that student to get that biology that they need. And the issue that's listed there is because there are no other AV courses that exist for that particular student. So what we'll develop is a section or 2 of another content area to back up to that math class that was recently recommended by the board for AV. So there will be some more flexibility that will take place between now and then to ensure the CIT students get exactly what they need in the schedule. And as I mentioned before, the reason for that was the recent change to the math being AB versus semester. But that is an easy adjustment. You have a typical 10th grader with a band in their schedule, They have the ability to have band for a full year every other day, adding up, so they're there if they're in concert band, if they're in marching band. They have the ability to be with Mrs. Luddy. They have the opportunity to take all of their other core courses, and there is no disruption to that process. Students will not have to choose between band and other electives. It's built into the schedule. It works. That's a typical 10th grade schedule. The next schedule is, I believe, an 11th grader. The reason why I selected this particular schedule is because this student in 11th grade has pretty much a full complement of advanced placement courses. They have AP English Language, AP Psychology, European History, Chemistry with a Chemistry Lab, Pre-Calculus, and Honor Spanish 4. For this particular student, they have the ability to have full year courses in advanced placement, ready to take the test in May, and they don't have, to worry about not being able to get those particular courses. And they have something that's new, which they don't have now, and that's a direct study period. So even seniors right now give up a double block lunch, instructionally not really important in my mind, but important to them as seniors. It is something they look forward to, something that they enjoy when they get that sense of responsibility. It is something that students now will be able to take 8 classes, or 8 periods, so to speak, and still have the time to go out to lunch on that lunch IE period. Or stay for that AP Physics help that they might need in preparation for their test. We have a typical 11th grade schedule here as well. So you go from advanced placement to your typical academic student, and they have the same offerings and the same schedule basically, but looking at their load is very important. Now if you look at their semester 1, they have applied chemistry, entrepreneurship, Spanish 3, geometry, and that's 5 courses. If you flip to their back schedule now and count the amount of courses they have, I believe it is 7. So you've reduced that student load by 2 courses for semester 1. Semester 2, I believe the student has 4 courses, therefore being able to spend more time focusing in on those courses versus the 7 that they have in their schedule right now. And the last is an example, as I mentioned before, of a typical 12th grader. Instructionally, not the most important thing, but it is an opportunity for a student to still take 8 blocks, 4 classes, or that meet every other day, and throw in some electives, and still have the ability to have lunch study during that time period in the middle of the day, along with their peers. Presented a lot of information. It is the high school's recommendation that we move forward with this particular schedule for the 2012-2013 school year. I understand some of it is very new to some of the board members. And we presented 3 or 4 other times to previous boards. This is the best for our students at Easton Area High School. Our current schedule has some struggles. But as I mentioned before, what's most important is not just to create a structure and think it's a solution. It's what takes place within that structure that matters most. We've been trying to improve our instruction, increase the amount of engagement that is taking place in our classrooms. This will allow us to increase it even more. Sustained learning is key to us moving forward and preparing our students for the 21st century. Questions?
The intervention plan that you have somewhat developed, you haven't completely developed, how far along are you in developing that plan as far as the goals, the actions, the accountability within that period, and how you measure the success that that period has for these students?
A couple weeks, depending on the sport's decision. Right now, it's a matter of investing time in what we're currently doing, which is following our school improvement plan, preparing students for the PSSAs, and gathering this other information. The details of this plan, will come out in the weeks ahead to ensure that that is quality time. What I've given you is basically some opportunities that will be available to students. To help you understand what it would look like is when students will be assigned to a homeroom per se to attend for that block of time, and there will be things that will be put out for the first week or school or so to prepare us to then go into an intervention or enrichment or assistance phase. We will then go back to those homerooms for those other opportunities to incorporate the guidance curriculum and those other things that right now we're losing instructional time to. One of those that is key is right now our English teachers are spending basically 8 days in 9th grade giving students foresight assessments. Our math teachers are spending 8 days, 8 class periods giving foresight assessments. Those are perfect opportunities to be completed in direct study because every student in the building will have that direct study period. We now use instructional time to do height, weight, eyes. We use instructional time to do pictures. We use instructional time to do numerous things that pull from instruction. This direct study will take care of that, but that's not its original intent. Its original intent is to provide students with interventions so that we don't have to try to remediate. And what's happening is, students will go to summer school for remediation, but many of our students will be logged back in to a course the following year, which then increases the numbers in that particular course. It's a wasted resource. We need to provide the interventions now. And some of it is, let's build it and make sure that it's prepared. The interventions that we're looking at right now, we've been meeting as a math group and we've been meeting as a literacy group to ensure we know exactly what students need. Do they need fluency? Do they need decoding? Do they need basic math facts? Do they have issues with pre-algebra? And then now we're looking at systems to be able to address that. Not only in a directed study period, but also within the confines of that 80-minute block of time, because that's when it's most crucial.
So, I guess my question is, how are you developing? You think it's only going to take 2 weeks to develop a plan as to how you're going to identify students, the individual students' needs, and develop a, so to speak, care plan for these individual students? And how will you know that teachers are available for their specific needs? Also, you mentioned that students that miss a class, one week, one day, they'll be able to go in the next day. How do you know that teacher will be available during that intervention time that student has? It might not be the same corresponding period.
Some of these things are being worked out and are in tentative phases. What I don't want to present to the board is a plan that is not 100% tested and prepared and reviewed so that it could be, well, Mr. Cook has said it was going to be this, and now it's slightly different. Those things are going to have to happen over some time. It's not going to be 2 weeks, but the structure that will be created can be done in the next 2 to 3 weeks. As I described to you before, in terms of students being assigned, individual interventions, some of those will be determined at the conclusion of this school year, and they need to be flexible. To give you another example, Carrie, is that students also, teachers, have that 3A, 3B. Teachers that typically teach 9th grade will be available 3A. Their lunch will be 3B. Their schedules will mirror that of those grade level students. So right now, if you have Earth and Space Science, for example, we have 5 teachers teaching Earth and Space Science. Those 5 teachers would be available 3A for intervention. The 5 or 6 English teachers we have teaching grade 9 will be available for intervention on 3A. Our teachers teaching geometry is predominantly 10th grade. They will be available for intervention on 3B. Our U.S. History 2 teachers will be available for intervention on 3B. Their assignments for their duty period will align to the grade level of students that they currently teach. That's how I know they'll be available for their students.
Okay, I guess I have a little bit of concern that there's still, obviously more than 2 weeks' time that you need to work out the intervention plan. And so I'll go on with some other questions. That's just one of my concerns. I'm more understanding that you want to move toward this, but I'm more concerned about the time frame of moving into that process. That, perhaps jumping in next year might not be quite the most productive way to do this and do it right. So I'll just go on with some of the other questions that I have. As far as professional development, I understand that you just had Dr. Reddick here to go over things with the teachers in their last in-service. How much more work has been done thus far? How much more work is going to be allowed for the rest of the year so that we know that the teachers have been worked with as far as professional development on their part?
Right now, we're looking at about 192 teachers at the high school. That staff has been split up around 60 or so per session with Dr. Reddick. So all professional staff will go through 3 basic 5-hour days. The one session will be related directly to instruction. There'll be a discussion about a 3-part lesson plan. There's an introductory, there's a presentation component, there's an application phase and a synthesis phase. The second set of training is related to curriculum. They're looking at the last block of time that some of our teachers, 60 of our teachers went to training with Dr. Reddick for 5 hours, and the other 120 teachers were doing curriculum revision, so to speak. They're not necessarily revising their curriculum. What they're doing is taking a look at it in terms of pacing that out in 90 days versus 180 in some cases, or in most cases, or 45 days if they used to have 90. And what they're doing is making sure that they're planning for that now. The second component to that is actually looking at specific lesson structures as it relates to the units of instruction that they're addressing now. Most of what good PDE, most of what good PDE is the ability to provide teachers with an opportunity to learn something and then to support them as you move into the process. So they've spent some time with Dr. Reddick, all of them will, about 5 hours. What's crucial is that we then provide that refresher coming back to the beginning of next school year, and we continue to have ongoing professional development addressing those issues that arise as we move through the schedule the first year. That is the typical plan for professional development, and that is recommendations from professionals like Dr. Reddick, who does this across the nation and across the globe.
Yeah, I understand his credentials, definitely, certainly understand that. Again, I have concerns about the speed at which we're moving into this, considering where we are right now in the planning phase. And I'll go back to the intervention plan that's a concern. But let's move forward a little bit, and I have a question about the communication that you plan to have with the students and the parents. I know that sporadically students have been talked to, given certain teachers or whatever, but I don't think across the board everyone has been talked to about this block scheduling. And I certainly know that parents in general, unless they've gone to the PK meetings, which very few attend, haven't specifically been talked about this type of scheduling and its potential for being here next year. So what's the plans regarding that?
There will be a communication plan. One of the issues with communicating all of these things to parents and students is we don't yet have approval to do that. So it'd be very difficult to us to go out to the public and present to large masses of people to describe a schedule that may or may not exist. I mean, that is one of our issues with moving forward with a communication plan. We're in contact with other districts that have used communication plans, and what we're looking at doing is providing those opportunities for parents and students alike to come in to a session, receiving the information about what their current schedule looks like, what the new schedule will look like in terms of those opportunities, and provide them with an opportunity for Q&A to ask very specific questions about what does this mean for my son or daughter? What does this mean for our school? So in terms of a communication plan, as an administrative team and as a school, we're not going to go out to the public and present a plan that we're not necessarily sure is granted your approval, so to speak.
I think I'm referring to if this was to be, approved by the board, your suggestion, then my thought was that you have a plan already in place as to what you would do, and I haven't heard
Yeah,
that,
parent
so I guess
meetings-
that's what I'm asking.
Parent
you.
meetings in March, parent meetings in April, follow through with with student schedules. We're in the scheduling process right now. Students have their electives or will have their electives entered. The core courses have been entered. The 8th grade requests have been entered. So some of those specifics, parents could have in hand tentative schedules April, May, assuming staffing stays the same. Tentative schedules in hand to understand what this is going to look for them next school year. A majority of that work in terms of the schedule was done in creation of the mock schedule.
Regarding the discharge time, it states on these papers that you've given us, and the PowerPoints that you've given us, that the end of day would be 2:30, which is different than what it is now. So have we talked about transportation?
Yeah, the end of the day is going to be 2:20. That original schedule before you came in, Carrie, I described to them was somewhat tentative. There's going to be some time increments worked out. There'll be a homeroom built into there, and that will be made official once all of those details are worked out. That wasn't by any means what's going to go in the student handbook at this period of time. It was a direct translation of what we have now with 40-minute blocks of time to 80-minute blocks of time, and the more of the specifics will be entered as we move forward.
So, that being said, the 2:20, then you're not going to necessarily have all blocks of time 80 minutes each. Is that correct?
It could be 79, that's correct.
Or less? Because that's 10 minutes right there, and you're talking about a homeroom period, which would be another, okay.
That's correct.
Then I just wanted to go back to, that you had mentioned about the half of your faculty was working on pacing. How far are we along with the pacing guides that the curriculum will be following?
They turned
At
in
this point.
those, they submitted those to Jeanette and I, Ms. Cassis and I, this morning. So we'll have to review those and see at what point in time, what they've completed, what they'll need to complete between now and then during the professional development time, during the departmental meetings after school, during the 20 minutes they have in the morning. There's a plan to have those sort of things completed and prepared by the conclusion of this school year.
And I'm assuming that you probably went over the schools that you talked to via the phone.
That's correct.
There were no schools that you have up until today, because recognizing that you've had a little bit of time from our last meeting, that you visited or anything.
No visits.
And the committee, the school schedule committee, that was made up of parents and students and faculty, that was part of one of the PowerPoints, and I was part of that, so I know that that was originally the intent, was to be able to go and visit these schools, to actually feel what the situation was and ask questions and see issues, formulate questions while you're walking through the school. So we are eliminating that from a possibility.
No, I think the committee actually, when I presented them back in December of 2010, had made a decision that this is the schedule that we were going to present to the school board. 2010. And then it was presented to the school board in January based on that committee's nod that this was the schedule that we were moving forward with.
But there's no, I guess I just keep on going back to, I would have seen some benefit in seeing a school and feeling what goes on day to day and being able to talk directly with, especially where it's such a drastic change for a huge school. To take it on, means really researching it to the, to the ends of the earth, to make sure that you're doing the right things, formulated all the questions, had answers, and I guess that's where I get concerned, that we haven't done a lot of that vetting before we move into that phase, that we just plunge straight into it. So I guess those areas are, the pacing guides not being, directly completed at this point. We're in February right now. There's a limited amount of time. The teachers still, obviously they have things that they're working on with students currently without the additional, pressures of trying to figure out what we're going to do with block scheduling. And it seems like there's an awful lot of work that needs to be done. I just am wondering if we're ready for September. Not that it's a negative, but I'm just saying, you know.
And as the principal of grades 11 and 12 at Eastern Area High School, I'm telling you that we are ready. And that's why I'm making the recommendation that we put this schedule in place for the 2012-2013 school year.
Based on your answers, I would differ. That's my own opinion. Thank you.
Mike, we've obviously been looking at this from a action plan since 2010, based on the flexible scheduling of the action plan. Detailed dates. Now, I look at the fact that you obviously answered the question we had previous to sequence and A and B, and I appreciate that tremendously because to me it makes a lot of sense. I know the ongoing professional development will continue, and I sat in on professional development last Friday with Dr. Reddick, and I think teachers can pick that up because they think teachers are rather intelligent, and I think that they will be flexible enough to teach an 80-minute block with no problem at all. One of the things that we have changed is some of our meeting procedures where we're not pulling teachers out. Teachers are in the classroom to teach, and I think that's critical, and that will continue. I like the fact of flexibility and the direct study, obviously foresights, mediation, and obviously with that A and B, you obviously answered a lot of questions tonight with reference to the science concepts, because we can put that in a B schedule, had an A schedule first semester, then we go to a B schedule. That looks really good. And the nice thing about this is, man, when I go through this, I don't see many study halls. I see accountability all the way around with teachers. I see accountability all the way around with students. And I think right now, since we've been considering this since 10, which is like February of 2010, and now we're in February of 12, I think we need to bring this to a vote at the end of the month. And I would agree with you. I don't think there's any question about it, seeing what you're doing, knowing your knowledge of scheduling, working with you, and obviously seeing a professional development. This is ready to move forward from my perspective. Do we all have questions about intervention? We should have questions about intervention. And that may be that flexibility will come into play with that. But I think you're on the right track. I really appreciate your efforts on this because obviously you answered a lot of our entire questions tonight. Thank you.
If I could add,
Sure.
I would just like to thank you and your committee. I think this was the most effective presentation on this topic that I have heard in my short time on the board. Your answers to the questions were thorough. The fact that you incorporated the math recommendations was key to me. So I think you made a lot of progress in this. Two things going forward, I would echo Mrs. Ellison on the communication. Because you've been dealing with it for so long, sometimes in your mind it's a done deal, but to parents it may be a total surprise.
Understood.
And the second thing would be not to lose sight of while you're doing this, which is there's certain outcomes you want. So I would highly recommend that you look at ways to measure those outcomes and get feedback during your initial phase so that you can make course corrections. But in my mind, well done.
Mr. Carr,
Yes, sir.
obviously the history of block scheduling isn't good. Is it?
Well, it depends on who you ask, Mr. Arnson.
I don't have statistics on it, but I know of 3 school districts in this area that went to block scheduling that no longer have it. In other words, they trashed it. Now, I doubt it, because I'm from Easton, obviously I'm talking from that side. I doubt that they did the preparation that we did, that you did. I doubt that, and it may be the reason why those school districts are not using block scheduling. But I tried to get information on statistics nationally, And every time I went into the computer, which is a foreign area, I ended up with a statistic on failed marriages, which I started to think maybe it's the same. We all, in a perfect world, think that marriage is going to, we get married, this is going to last forever. We know that the statistic is 6 out of 10 failed. And that's the statistic that I kept getting instead of what I was really looking for. So what I'm trying to say is that I believe, or I have a feeling that the history, if we had the statistic, that the history would not be favorable. But I also think that the reason may have been, or may be, because where it failed, they didn't have the preparation to succeed. And that's what I'm hoping, that we have the preparation that will make it succeed. Because the worst thing that happens in education, in my opinion, is that we constantly are changing and looking for something. When in fact, if we go back to the beginning of a classroom teacher in a room with students in front of them, that's what worked. It still works in a lot of places. And it doesn't take as many variables to be successful. This takes a lot of people working together and a lot of contribution from support and everything else to make it work. Hopefully we have that. I'm confident that we do, but I'm still concerned about the bottom line. You know, the failure rate is not good, I believe.
I'm by no means an expert on block scheduling. Dr. Reddick could be that individual. But what I can tell you, Mr. Owens, is the problem that many blocks have, and what we've even seen in this area, is an evolution. And that is that the traditional 4x4, 90 minutes, used to be 45, and now it's 90, moving to that particular block without providing students with flexibility, interventions, making way for AP courses, and doing those sort of things is not successful. But as I mentioned before, it's what happens within that time structure that matters most, and you just echoed that same thing with your concern. So even in this particular area, when you look at those that are becoming more successful or maintaining their schedule, they're becoming more creative in ways to provide students with interventions. Nazareth is a typical scenario, going from a traditional 4x4 to having a direct study period called Eagle Block. Salisbury just went to an AB schedule. Everything is AB that you saw in the particular schedule. And that was because of demands on various different stakeholders that they agreed to that. Freedom High School has also implemented a PATE block. They are a traditional 4x4. And what they're realizing is those things are necessary for meeting the individual needs of their students. So there's an evolution there. And I think even the ones that you're seeing going away still have blocks of time in those schedules. They might not be 6 days of a 6-day schedule, but they're 4 or they're 2. This particular schedule had to meet a certain set of qualifications of needs. I don't think 80 minutes of the block of time is a silver bullet, but I know 40 doesn't get us where we need to be. So that's what the schedule that we created is based upon, where we need to be. And 41 minutes isn't going to get us there.
We've always had a modified block at the high school, whether it be PSSA math and study island with an additional semester for those students, whether it be the Read 180 where we actually double up those students who needed it. When we look at some of our labs in science, our labs in calculus, we're giving those people actually a block to work with their kids. So you're taking essentially a block with intervention with also the AB component, and I think it meshes pretty well. I think Michael and that committee have done a heck of a lot of work on this.
The other thing I will say is just in terms of preparation, there are certain departments, teachers, content areas that are obviously more prepared right now, today in February, than others. And the reason for that is you go to a tech ed or to an art teacher or to a family consumer science teacher and some of these other areas, they've been begging for time for years. And it's those individuals that spend 40 minutes at the, in a class period with anxiety from the start to the end of their class. They literally run around the room. Because by the time they get the kids started and the kid starts the project, they got to clean everything up. They run. I mean, literally run. If you go in a culinary lab in our school, the teacher is, let's go, got to clean up at the same time you're going to do it. She speaks faster than normal human beings. Because she's been doing it for so long in a certain amount of time. She looked at me one day and said, Mike, we need that schedule change. But it's an example of some being prepared. Right now, the majority of your science teachers are teaching in a block anywhere from 1 to 3 days of a 6-day cycle already. They're teaching that time. So they're already prepared. Some of our math teachers are currently doing it. English teachers are currently doing it. Others are not. Those are the ones we tried to put up front. Now, the business department has done that. That's why we tried to get them to Dr. Reddick first, so that they can start looking at what it's like. And I agree, Mr. Arntz, entirely. It is a team effort. And East Area High School staff, faculty, surrounding community students will have to come together, as we always do, and move forward with a change in our schedule, because it's in the best interest of our students.
Any other questions for Mike? Thank you. Any community comment on the academics and ed?
Bill, have one thing you point out?
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Brooks?
Yes, sorry. Got my glasses back on now. I'm okay. All right.
Thank you. I have included in your packet for the week the approval for the Eastern Area High School graduation venue. In the past, it's been at Stabler. The contract was also included. The main thing that has been changed is that there's been a $300 increase in the base cost. And Mr. Cuff, because he's a great planner, kind of padded, and I don't mean that in a negative way, he sort of estimated higher than what I think Stabler really said that we would be incurring. That increase of $300 takes us to $8,900 as the base cost of the rental. And there was another approximately $200 and some in other possible costs that are incurred. So just so you know, that's the basic cost, and then there's maybe a few $200 more. Mike estimated higher. So the overall cost for the venue and everything associated with it, Mike had estimated around $32,199. It's probably closer to probably $31,500. So there's a slight increase of about 3.5%, which is approximately the increase of the cost of the base rental from $8,600 to $8,900. So I'm here this evening to recommend to the board that we continue this venue. This is money that we do happen to budget each year to cover the costs, and that's why I'm here this evening for any questions.
I have one question.
Frank, go ahead.
Mr. First, are you the one, or is it Mr. Cuff that gets all these prices for us?
Mr. Cuff,
I just wanted to direct my question to the right person, that's all.
No, Mr. Cuff is the one that did the spreadsheet. I don't know, I think he's here if you would like to ask him.
Yes, Mr. Goodbone.
Mr. Cuff, I know a lot of these fees are things we can't do anything about, like Hellertown Police,
Sure.
Suffolk Police. My question is with Harmony Press, which I do like, they're located on Burger Street in Southside. However, are we shopping this around every year and trying to, I think everybody knows that I'm a big fan of bidding out and trying to get the best price or the best bang for our buck. We have a lot of nice sized printing places in Easton, Palmer, Forks, downtown. Did we check anybody else out before we just agreed on Harmony Press at $2,800?
Harmony Press is pretty competitive. If we were to come up with some other options and review them with Harmony, they would match the price unless it was ridiculous and the quality was greatly decreased.
So can we do that?
What we did look at in the past was we looked at our own printing services trying to do something like this, but I think at cost it still was virtually the same. I don't have that dollar figure with me. I'd be more than happy to look at that. I think really tonight we need to move forward with the venue. And some of these items on here, Mr. Pinnabone, I can look at, go back and do a little bit more research to try to cut back. But most of it is necessity, as you mentioned before.
Right.
We're bringing a cavalcade of buses from Easton, PA to Bethlehem, Bedlam. And en route, we need to make sure that we have, those sort of police, folks around. But that particular question, I can make contacts next week, get a couple different quotes. But like I said, we've been working with Harmony. They do an excellent job for us. You hate to leave somebody out in the cold. I'd like at least give them the opportunity to say, this is what your competitor is saying. Can you match it? Because their service also is stellar, and their deadlines, I don't know if anyone's going to beat them in terms of when we can get them finished product and when they can get them printed for us. But we can look at that, Mr. Pinbone, definitely.
Well, I appreciate it, and I understand that, and I appreciate you not wanting to leave them out in the cold. They're not really my responsibility. My responsibility is to the district and the taxpayers. So Harmony Press is under that. So if we can really look at that, and I'm sure, being that we're the high school and everybody's struggling, and I can see people trying to beat everybody else out to get a quality product at a better price so they can, keep their business going and so we can use them going forward. So I think it's a necessity that we look around and try to price, and I don't want to take cheaper work.
How many competitors would you like to see, Mr. Pinbone? I can have that available for you for the board meeting.
I don't know, 4. And I'll tell you what, I know you have a lot to do with school and a lot of scheduling. I can also shoot you an email with some numbers for you to follow up on tomorrow, so I can take some of that work away from you. And if you want to follow it up, and I'm not going to make the call obviously because I don't know exactly what you're looking for, but I will get you the numbers and things and let you do that.
And my 12th grade secretary will handle that because she controls it.
Yeah, I'll help you get the numbers.
What to do and what the product needs to look like, so that she would actually take care of that. But if you have some recommendations for numbers, send them along.
I mean, I don't know. Don't get me confused. I don't know if they're going to beat them, but I think it's worth taking a look, see if we can get a good product at a lower price. And so some companies that I know from driving by and things, I'll send you the numbers, and if you guys can make contact and see if there's anything we can do to try to lower that cost.
No problem.
Thank you.
Frank, if you do that, you have to copy Mike on it as well.
Absolutely.
Karen.
There was the second page where you refer to the class paying for the sound system.
That's correct.
Last year, we had discussed this as a board, that, this is graduation and the students shouldn't have to be paying for the graduation ceremony. That should be coming out of the district's budget, since these students have been in this district for 12 years and we're recognizing them for their accomplishments. And I feel that same way right now. So I'm putting that forth to the committee, that they consider that when they look at these numbers and think about if that's something that this board wants to consider, or leave it the way they suggested and have them pay for it, the sound system.
Isn't it a class gift? Isn't that what they suggested? The class suggested we pay for it because is that how it was done, or was it?
I think the history of it was, there was a concern about the cost of the venue and everything that they had costed out here. I believe it was Mr. Cook who had said he would take back to the senior class the idea that I know they still wanted to have the large screens, and if they did, that they would pay for that piece of it in order to keep it. And I think then what happened was, I think you're right, I think the ordinance said, we would like to maybe take a look at that, which is why I'm bringing this now, because I don't want to just throw it out there at the last minute. And if the board would want to do that, they could certainly approve the venue at the meeting with a suggested budgetary number. Mr. Cuck presented these numbers just to give you an idea of what some of the inflation, or the inflated, when I say inflated, the costs due to inflation were, And, to show that, if we had to go that route, how, that would work. And
It was requested of me after the ceremony, so I presented it. So this year, I'd rather have you look at it and know up front that this is a cost that is being incurred by the students. It does have its roots back to class of 2009, and there was some contribution by the class of 2009 for screens, not for the blue chip sound system, which was paid for by the district. The following year was the class when I was the 12th grade principal, the class of 2010. That particular class incurred both costs because there was a lot of deliberation about moving, the graduation. And at that time, the class officers, the class of 2010, really wanted to ensure that their graduation ceremony was at Stabler Arena. And therefore, they then incurred the cost of both the sound and the projection screens, because we went with one company, which was also a cost savings in general. Before, the screens were $6,000 and it was about $2,000 and change for just the sound system. And then the last year's class of 2011, those students have been planning for this since they were, freshmen and sophomores, that they would incur this cost, just like their senior picnic, just like their class gift preparations, and so on and so forth. So those officers have been looking at this for the past couple of years and have budgeted for it. But if the school district feels the same way, the rest of the board members feel the same way you do and I do, that this is the most significant event of their educational careers, and you're willing to pay for that, then that'll be your decision.
I guess my point is that it's where the school district is recognizing them. That's my point. And it's not, there's a lot of significant events through your 12 years, obviously, of being here in this district. But it's where we are finally, if we haven't recognized them on any other level in their 12 years, which some kids just don't get recognized, this is the culmination of that. And so why are we having them pay for part of the ceremony? They do class gifts for other items. Signs that are up at the high school are given by the classes, and they do significant other gifts that matter greatly to the district. So to have them have to pay for part of the ceremony is, in my mind, it just seems like that's someplace where the district should be providing the sum of money needed. That was my point.
Thank you. We agree. But we also know we had some financial...
No, and I understand where that all, the history of it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Public now? Public for academic senate, thank you.
Want to sign in?
Please.
Maureen Mardiak, 752 Washington Drive, I just had a couple questions for Mr. Cup. When he was giving the mock schedules for the other grades, other than the one he put up, we don't have the benefit of seeing that. So my questions may be answered if I could see what an 11th grade AP schedule looked like. Sure. Because my question was science lab. Now my son is 1.4, so he has every other day lab. How does that look like? What does it look like for in a block schedule or flexible schedule?
It's 1.5. The student will have a semester 1 course, honors or space science, honors whatever science, the second half of the year they'll have an AP course that aligns to it. So they'll have 135 days of instruction for that particular science class.
Okay, because his guidance counselor is telling him he cannot take the schedule he wants if it goes to flexible schedule. Because he wants 3 electives, and she said it's not a possibility. So I don't know how to look at that or answer that for him.
And some of those, like I said, some of those questions will be worked out. I can look at his specific options. He can stop in and see me in office.
I'm sure he's not alone. I'm just pointing him out because I know about him specifically. And then I had some parents email me questions because they couldn't be here about orchestra, newspaper, and yearbook. How does that?
Orchestra is built into the schedule. Which one was it? Yearbook is built into the schedule, and the last one was
Newspaper.
Newspaper is not in the schedule.
That
now.
would be directed study.
It was cut back. It would be during directed study time. Unless things change with periods and sections and those sort of things where we can add Junto back in. But Junto was reduced before as a class simply because our staffing was decreased by 5 teachers in the English department.
Okay. So I just want to see the other sample schedules.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll give it back.
Mr. Ryder, such a grand welcome. It almost takes me back to Mr. Myers today there. I'm a parent of a 15-year-old child who attends a local high school and is in block scheduling. That block scheduling would not work if I didn't have the communication that I receive on a weekly basis, monthly basis around this time of year from the guidance counselors, the principals, and the teachers. And listening to what the teachers in this district have been saying, that communication is possible, but a determination, they need to know that this is a direction that we are moving in. Mr. Huck has done a wonderful job with the help of Ms. Cassis, and they sat me down and explained it all to me. I believe that they are able to communicate about it extremely well. They are able to assist the staff in communicating about it. But right now, it's almost like we're at a standstill. Teachers have come to me and said, where are we going with this? Should we be prepared to go in this direction, or should we be prepared to not go in this direction? Either way, they just need to know which way to go. Because we can adapt, but we can't guess. So that's my urge, is to ask you to take action as soon as possible so that we can plan moving forward.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Brett Bonfonte, I just wanted to comment on a few possible problems that I see with the current flexible scheduling proposal. And the first and foremost is math. In every math class I've been in since 5th grade, the schedule has been the same every day. You come in, you go over the last night's homework, you ask questions about that, then the lesson of the day is given, and at the end the homework is assigned. And that continues all year, and for me it works, and I think for others it does work. But if you switch to the flexible scheduling, you'll have an 80-minute period. Now normally, there will be one schedule taught on Monday, and one lesson taught on Monday, and another lesson taught on Tuesday. But with the modified schedule, both of these lessons will have to be crammed into one day, because there will only be 90 days to complete all of the course's material, rather than the 180 days. I think that if you combine both of these lessons into one day, the sustained learning, as we're hoping for, is not going to happen, because so much is being put into a student's mind at the same time. And that's really overwhelming, especially for someone like myself who always has to seek extra help in math. So I think that should be looked at. Also, a point that I had made previously, and that Mrs. Ellison has made tonight, is that there is no guarantee that a teacher will be available for a certain student during the intervention period. And Mr. Cock, I've asked him about it personally, and he said, well, most of the time that these teachers would be, the 10th grade teachers would be available when most 10th grades have intervention. However, there are a lot of teachers that do not just teach one grade. In my own schedule, my statistics teacher also teaches geometry. She's the only person in the building that knows statistics and can teach statistics. So if she was not available during my intervention period, I would not be able to seek help other than after school, which is what I currently do. Also, Mr. Cook has informed me that this teacher should probably be available during the 12th grade time, which is the grade she teaches most. But then because other teachers teach geometry, and that other teachers can help these students in geometry with their geometry, and it doesn't have to be that specific teacher who teaches them, who is their course instructor. However, in my high school career, when I go to math lab with my pre-calculus, with my algebra 2, with my geometry, and there's a teacher there who only teaches algebra 1, he or she cannot do the geometry, pre-calculus, and algebra 2, and I'm out of luck. I'm out of luck because theoretically they should be able to teach it because they've gone to school for mathematics, hopefully, but they can't, and I think that's a huge problem. The language teachers as well. My French teacher teaches 9th through 12th graders. I don't know when she would be available during her intervention either. And the last thing I'd like to say is that intervention will only be as effective as individual students make it. You cannot force someone to seek math help. You cannot force someone to join an organization. I'm afraid that intervention will become a time in which children are sitting around doing nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? In summary, to move forward to the board agenda, to recommend or to vote on the flexible scheduling at the high school, as well as the graduation venue. I'd like to have those both on the board minutes. In conjunction to that. Thank you.
We're going to be making a slight change here while we're waiting for Aaron to arrive, and we're going to jump down to athletics.
Mr. Krivsak is going to talk about the problems that we're having with televising local athletic events, and then he's going to handle the problem of cheerleading, and then we're going to listen to the public if they have any concerns. I think you want to especially listen to the letter A, broadcasting of EASD athletic events on local television.
Thank you, Mr. Arns. I have a bad head cold right now, so please don't talk loud, because I have a muffled feeling in my head right now. Number one, the broadcasting of athletic events on local television. I know a few board members, administrators attend our events regularly. Easton is very good in most of our televised events, the way the quality of our teams. And what is happening is, because we are usually a winning team in those events, they come to us a lot to televise. That's good. My concern is right now we're currently getting about $150 for a televised event. Unfortunately, they don't televise Adira in some sports if they're not having a good season, or other teams that they have out. They're coming to Easton because of quality. The league does not have a set policy on how much we charge. This is a school district decision to make. I surveyed a variety of schools in the Lehigh Valley and what they do charge. Some charge anywhere from no charge. The RCN, or Service Electric, is in their home district, to $300 for a live event, to $150 as we charge, and I believe that was the highest, was $300 for a live event. I estimate they're in our district about 10 times, mainly for football, boys basketball, and for wrestling. And between those three revenue-generating events, they're there approximately 10 times a year. And if we're having a good year, that number can go up. Again, we're usually pretty decent in those three sports. So right now, at $150 per event, at 10 times, we're recouping about $1,500. $150 really at $5 a ticket is saying only 30 people between Easton and the visiting team are going to stay home and watch it on TV. So that's all we're recouping is for 30 people. On a cold night, Jersey United Cottingham all season, or a big wrestling match up at the middle school against one of our rival opponents, I know there are more than 30 people that are going to stay home, depending on what night it is, and depending on the weather. I don't want to outprice ourselves, but at the same time, I know college coaches don't sit at home and recruit our players by watching television. So I feel we're losing a lot of revenue from ticket sales, and I've noticed the past few years it's starting to dwindle a little bit, possibly the economy and some other things. But whenever we have live television, I know for a fact our attendance is down the last 2 to 3 years. So I'm looking to try to find a remedy for that. Possibly $1,000 for a live event. And if they don't come, it's not a big deal, because hopefully those people will still come and buy a ticket to come see the event live. We did not have freedom on television last week in basketball. We moved the game from Friday to Thursday because they had District 11 wrestling at their facility. So we moved the game from Friday to Thursday, and Service Electric had Lehigh basketball on, and RCN had another event on. We had a nice crowd there. It was a nice event. We had a couple problems with our students, but we had a nice event. A nice crowd in the stands for a basketball game. Unfortunately, we lost. Again, we had that same event with live television. I think we would have had maybe half of the crowd we did have. And that was our highest event revenue that we brought in that night. We had Parkland Wrestling the other night. We thought that was going to be a premier match in wrestling. Attendance was dismal. Bethlehem Catholic brought a decent amount, which was live on television, and Phillipsburg always does. So I'm looking to find some ways to be creative. In March, I will be coming to you to revise our season ticket policy a little bit to entice people to buy a season ticket package, to also help increase that revenue and get people back into our venues. So that is why I'm here tonight, to look for some options before we get into next fall. They televise none of our events in the spring, but before we get close to next football season, I'm looking for some options.
I think I'm allowed to speak to this. I think we should start charging senior citizens a minimal amount, maybe student price.
Well, I think that's something we can discuss in March when we do the season ticket and we get into ticket prices. And normally I bring that to the board each year. We can look at that and kick that around. But right now, I think the broadcasting is what we have to, I think, take a look at right now.
When would you be equipped to bring a recommendation before the board?
Well, I
Is
have
it
a
$1,000?
I have a recommendation at the bottom. It was a revised one because in the beginning with the committees, when these were started, my understanding was it was a way to discuss and bounce ideas back.
Right.
If you're looking for a recommendation from me, I did send out a quick revision to request of Mr. Simonetta, and I put in there $1,000 for a live event, $500 for tape delay. Will Service and RCN be upset with us? Because again, they like coming here, or will they turn around and pay it? I don't know. I know my cable bill for Service Electric went up anywhere between $7 and $10 as of the first of the year. Where that money goes for franchise fees and so on, I have no idea. I know Easton School District did not get a part of it. They did not say, we'll voluntarily give you some more money when we come to your place. So I guess I'm looking for some feedback and some options.
Have you ever thought of negotiating an exclusive contract with one or the other?
I think that would be a disservice to our local people who have Service and RCN in our district. They pick and choose what events they come to. And obviously, Easton Liberty basketball, Easton Freedom basketball, the big football games, they pick to come. And again, if it's going to be Easton versus a team in football that's not going to draw well and we're expected to win by a lot, they won't pay and they won't be there. Exclusivity, I don't know if that would help the district or not. But you're right, if you get them to bid against each other,
So the answer is no.
I don't think that would help us.
No, I mean, you haven't.
I haven't done. So we're going into an area that hasn't really been touched in high school athletics. But because of the quality of us, they come to Easton more than they come to most other high schools to televise.
I agree with what you're saying. Especially I look at when Easton comes to Bethlehem Catholic, they raise the ticket price.
They did that last year.
So they'll raise ticket prices on. I agree. We need to raise it up from 150 because we're getting hit on ticket sales. I'm not quite sure of the 1,000, but I like going high. But maybe we can pick a number of, let's say, 500 to 1,000 for negotiating purposes. You spoke of football, and we discussed our football stadium before. It's really not handicap or elderly friendly. A lot of those people stay home and watch it. My fear is if we say 1,000 and we stick to it, they say no, a lot of those people won't watch it. So maybe if we can have a range from maybe like 5 to 1,000 or something, let Mr. Simonetta go back and forth with them. On the low end, we get 500. That's just my opinion. On the high end, we'll try for the 1,000. But I definitely think we need to up that to generate more revenue and to make up for the lost ticket sales.
And I don't think it's a negotiation. Each district just sets their own rate. And I don't know how they negotiate it. We've never done that. I've continued what the previous athletic director did. It was always $150, whether it's live or tape delay. I just continued with that, and that is somewhat in range
Well, I guess when I
what
say
some schools are
negotiate,
doing.
at 150, there's really nothing to negotiate. They probably jumped all over that. If we say 1,000, they might want to push back a little bit or say, forget it, we don't want to be bothered. So that's why I think we should have, if we just say 1,000, we send you out there with the number of 1,000. They don't want to go with 1,000, we're stuck. So if we can just pick a range and then work
We
it,
can
if we
be
get some
creative
pushback.
and say, we're not going to allow live. Everything we do is tape delay. We could go that route. And say, we're not even offer a live broadcast of our events. Everything will be tape delay.
But then it kind of goes back to, like what you said with Mr. Dr. Viscaitis about exclusive rights to one or the other. You have some of the people who, that can't watch it, that want to watch their grandkids or kids or whatever, and they won't be able to get to see it live. So, I mean, I'm all for raising it. I just, I'd like to keep a window for Mr. Seminary to work with, if we so choose to go that way.
Did you get some other prices that other school districts?
As I said, 300 was the highest.
300 was the highest.
Yeah,
okay.
River Valley, one or two schools don't charge. I believe Northampton does not charge RCN because they're a taxpayer in their district. And I believe it's Emmaus does not charge Service Electric for whatever reason. But everybody else ranged from 150 to 300.
So, when you put that 1,000 out there, were you feeling comfortable with that number, or are you just throwing that out there?
It's a product we normally put on the court and on the field and on the wrestling mat. It does hurt me when we have a large event. We're expecting to have a large crowd, and we show up that night. And if the weather's a little bit funny, and we see it's half full, and in the past we've had full gyms, it's disheartening. It's disheartening.
And I
because we know
understand that, but I'm
people stay
wondering-
home and.
Right, but I'm wondering if you felt comfortable with asking them for that, because they're also hoping that they're going to get the viewing.
And we won't know until maybe 2 or 3 years from now if that's had an impact on our ticket sales. And people said, it's not on TV, so I'm going to buy the ticket and go to the game. But I have heard a lot of people say, nah, I'm staying home and I'm just going to watch it on TV. I don't get any money for that.
Well, the other option is not to allow any live telecasts.
So, like I said, I put a recommendation there, and we are a little all over the place. So that's why at the beginning I was looking for some feedback. Don't want to outprice ourselves, but if they don't broadcast it, maybe our ticket sales will go up next year. And we get the revenue, and it helps our athletic department.
I think people are going from 150 to 3 to shoot for 1,000 is a little bit high, but I think to shoot for 500 I think is very legitimate.
I could go with a 500 live broadcast.
Based on what the product is, because the product is pretty darn good.
And they're usually not, again, they're not doing the lower quality games. They're picking the premier events. So we're not getting full crowds for those premier events because people will stay home for various reasons.
Jim, how many people do you think your ticket sales are down? Are they down 100 people?
I won't know till the end of the year until I compare to each year and get out through that. And I usually do that in the late spring. But just visually watching and seeing some of our events this winter, we had some big basketball games, some big wrestling matches, and
The reason I ask 100 people, because 100 people at $4 or $5 is your $400 or $500 difference.
you're talking between Easton and the visiting team, so we're talking two communities.
I think if you're not sure where to go, and you don't think the 1,000's right, I think you have to tell us, is it the 1,000?
I could start with the 500. That's a motion we would go with 500 for live, and let's go 300 tape delay. And we put that as a motion for the board meeting in February. And
My
see where that
question
goes.
is, if we're looking for 5, why are we starting at 5? Why would we present 5 if that's what we're looking at and anticipating a pushback? Why don't we start at 750 if they push back we're at 5 where we want? So if we're looking to get 5 and 3, I don't think we should start at 5 and 3. We should start higher, anticipate pushback, and land at 5.
Well, if we set 5 and 3, they have to pay that or they don't come and televise.
Right.
It's not a negotiation. We would be setting that.
Right. I mean, if you put a higher number out there, let them come down to 5. To get, you know what I mean?
Is it a biddable issue?
That's
only if it's a biddable issue.
Well, not so much biddable, but we might say 7, they say, oh, no, how about we can get approval for 5? But if we say 5 and they say 3, I'm just saying,
I've been in the athletic department for 15 years, and we haven't moved off the 150. So I thought, it's
I agree we have to
the
move.
products we offer and the quality the teams would normally have in those revenue events and their televised events. I think we need to.
Which they say it costs. All right, how about 5?
I'd be comfortable with the 500 and the 300 tape delay, to modify that recommendation.
You mentioned just the 150, that's for all sports?
Again, the only thing they televise is football,
Yeah, I
boys
understand.
basketball, wrestling.
Yeah, and that's 150 whether it's football or center
And if
basketball.
it's a playoff game, we get no revenue from that at all. That is generated and given to District 11 or the PIAA. Once it's a playoff event, even if it's at Easton and Easton involved, we get nothing from that.
You get expenses.
Well, yeah, expenses.
And I mean, I understand where you're coming from, you do get that. PIAA is nice enough to at least do that. I think I said that sarcastically.
Quick question, Mr. President. Are we now televising committee meetings? Because if so, we just told our team. When the hell did we start televising committee meetings? I didn't know we were televising.
We had discussed that before, so
I
that.
didn't know it was today.
Yeah. Wait a minute, thank you.
Notice that big camera over there, Chris?
Telltale
I told him everything. There goes the plan.
Again, that's a plan. I feel comfortable with the 500 and 300 after hearing some of the discussion.
Look at it again, that's
And we run that out over the next 2 years or so and see how it goes. See if our attendance increases. Again, in March, I'll probably bring a proposal to you in March or April to look at our season ticket prices that will start next August, September for football, to be approved. And I have some ideas to increase that or make that more palatable for senior citizens and season ticket holders and families. Okay? The second one is on the cheerleading recommendation. That is just from the past where this was created, again, well over a year ago. And we discussed cheerleading on and off all last year. And before I went out on the limb and made any recommendations on my own, without your approval, I just wanted to inform you of a few things I'll be looking to modify after going through those recommendations that I've put together before the start of next season.
Jim, are you going to take this back, or is this going to be our recommendation?
I will take this back, and again, I will work with the coaching staff on it, and we'll make sure the parents are informed before tryouts of what the basic rules and regulations to follow will be.
Okay, so that takes it off the plate then. There's
That
no
takes it off the
discussion.
plate. In addition to that, related to cheerleading, though, I just got information the state of Pennsylvania is taking over cheerleading. There will be a state championship next year, last weekend. This past weekend, a year from now, will be the state championship for cheerleading in Pennsylvania. With that, my budget will have to look at a few things, such as last year, or 2 years ago, we had $2,500 for tournament entry fees, as we do for other athletic teams that go to tournaments, and then about $2,500 for transportation for those cheerleaders to go to competitions. So I don't know how to proceed with that, because if we're going to acknowledge competition cheerleading next year, that will be coming to us, and if we're going to fund that.
Mike, will you help him with that?
I have one comment on this,
Those recommendations,
yeah.
everything plain is what the original was.
Right.
The
right.
coaches did the strike through and then highlighted what their wording was.
Well, and I.
So I did not write that, and I
Right,
didn't modify
I understand that,
it.
but I just wanted to comment on
Yep.
it. I know it's not your writing, but the last page is a side note, and I just had some concerns that I wonder if we as a district want to put out there. And I'll read specifically the wording that I have concerns about. Let's see, program is supposed to change, it's actually in the middle of the
Yep, see
paragraph
that.
there. Is supposed to change its standards in order that a certain parent is not disappointed because his or her child does not make the cut. I'm not quite sure if we need to, as a district, go and be negative about parents. You know, that just seems to not be the direction that we as a district would want to go, commenting on negative behavior of parents in that regard. And then a couple lines down, not buckle under the pressure of mediocrity just to please a few. again, it seems to be like a negativity there that I'm not quite sure.
We've made great strides in cheerleading, and I put these together last year, and Mrs. Freddie remembers, and you remember a lot of those
Yeah.
meetings and how late we were here. We got guidelines in place now.
And I
We're going
do.
through that, and I'm going to modify a little bit. I don't want to go back because of where we've been. I know where we've been. I want to hopefully move forward, and that's
But if
not
this
gonna
is
happen.
something that you're gonna have in writing anywhere, is this something?
No,
in
that is
writing?
something that coaches added to that to be forwarded to the board.
Okay, well, if it was gonna be
That's
in
not my
writing in
writing.
there, no, I know it's not your writing, but if you were gonna incorporate it in something that was gonna be shared with parents,
No, that
the
was not.
district, and the community, I
Correct.
just think that that's not quite the direction you're going.
I'm going to get out of here, Mr. Fainal. 2 or 3 good notes. Steve Aponologis, Easton graduate, article in the paper the last couple of weekends. Here is his book. Fantastic young man. Myself, Carm LeDuc, and Greg Hess had the opportunity to go up to his senior day, his last home football game a few years ago, and watch him play. All-time leading scorer in Boston College history. If you have a chance, look it up in the. I think Mrs. Shando has it on there. It's purchased online. He's doing this privately to sell the book, to get it out there, but a professional writer helped him put this together. He's going to be coming back to Easton from California, where he's residing, in the spring for a baseball game to throw the first pitch out. What a neat kid. What a neat kid. What a neat kid.
So you just go up.
I think if you Google Aponologis,
Okay.
Spell that 3 times.
he does pronounce it, but Sid Vicious.
Sid Vicious, yes, yeah.
But what a great kid and great story, and there may be something that comes about with a movie on this down the line, but he didn't say who would play him yet. Cheerleaders. I helped volunteer this past week at our middle school for the District 11 Cheerleading Championship. They won their division. Congratulations to wrestling. Won their 3rd straight District 11 championship. I'll be heading to Hershey Thursday afternoon, and their quest for another team championship. On that note, there were 14 state championships so far in team district and team states. Easton's been in 9 of them and won 4 of them. We've been in 9 out of 14 state championships. So unbelievable. And a thank you from Angel 34. Miss Capici was here last week to give you a rundown of the day at play. Mr. Sheriff wrote a thank you note on behalf of him and his foundation, and I forwarded that to you, I believe, and Dr. McGinley. I forwarded that thank you note from him and his foundation. And congratulations to Gabe Robinson. Gabe signed his official scholarship to the University of Cincinnati to play men's soccer next year. So, that's it athletically.
Anyone want to be heard? Okay, hopefully the next board meeting we'll be able to decide on, we'll be able to vote on what we're going to do about broadcasting the price, if we can get one. And as far as cheerleading is concerned, Mr. Krivsak's going to handle that. That shouldn't be so. We've kind of agreed that should be something the school board gets involved with. We can set the policy for cheerleading.
I think all we have to do, though, is have a motion on the floor that night to say that, the board is relinquishing that back, because at this point, last year, the board took ownership of that, and now we need it, so the motion for next week should be to relinquish.
He's been through the ringer with this stuff. He should be the one that has to do the wash.
Okay, moving on. Aaron is here. Okay, Aaron Hazar Kamet.
I've got 1,000 things to move, but don't worry about it. You've got 10,000 things to move. Those are yours. Policy, yes.
Karen?
We'll call the policy meeting to order, committee meeting to order, and first policy that we're going to be considering was 707.1, use of district facilities for before and after school care. Did everyone have an opportunity to read this policy in particular? Are there any questions?
I read it here. The only issue was restricting it only to potentially one fee issue, but also restricting it just to one provider throughout the district.
I think the way it's read is one provider per school.
Okay. Yep, it is. It is.
I think that one of the questions that we probably need to discuss probably in committee is a fee structure. That was something that Aaron had put in with it open-ended for the boards as far as stipulating how that fee structure would be formulated. So is there any discussion or suggestions? I know at one point we were discussing how much it really costs to use the facility for electricity, all the utilities, so that might be part of the fee structure. And also some estimate as to how much the custodial services would have to be used for keeping up the room afterward. I don't know, was there any research done in that as far as the cost?
No, but something I'd like to work with Tim and can present a number or some kind of structure to the committee.
So should we leave this way in the policy and leave it open-ended so that it's an ongoing process of developing a fee structure annually?
I'd like to take a look at it and just see what's fair for the provider and for the district.
And I think one other thing that we had mentioned last time that probably bears a little bit of discussion is the 501c3. If the district wanted to give a reduction for any 501c3 entities, I know that we're looking at a slightly different definition of nonprofit for this one, just because it's such a bigger, a larger contract, but that would impact some of that and decide whether you want to offset some of the costs as a district, or if you want to cover all your costs, and then for the non-501c3 entities, do you want to tack on a little bit more? So that's consideration.
So Mike, you want to take a look at that, and is that something that are we deciding that we're not going to include that in the policy then when we put this forward to the board to vote on the policy, and just leave that open-ended the way it's worded here? If we were to put this policy before the board this month, is everyone okay with the wording? Okay.
Karen?
Yes.
One thing I had brought up before is the concern that when there's an early dismissal that's non-planned, that would seem to me the time that parents need that aftercare the most. And yet the way it's written is that's not going to be provided or accommodated. Am I reading that correctly?
You're reading that the way I read it.
Yeah, and that does bear a little bit of, that calls for probably a bit of discussion as well. I think that is something that we should, you can do it either way. The legal considerations would be, if you are closing the district for bad weather, do you, at that point, you would have to continue to run the plows, you would have to continue to make everything safe for the parents who would come an hour, 2 hours later. So that would be really the only issue with that. There are no other, you're certainly free to leave it, leave it as it is, or extend it to, 2 hours past whatever time the district closes. But for any, for any unforeseen closings, obviously, there might be some issues with that.
The only other issue I could see with that is if the provider isn't prepared to come in, they would have to come in earlier than they typically would be here. So if they weren't prepared to drive in and be part of that after-school care if we released early, then that might potentially be a conflict for some of these parents. And I don't want to see the school district held liable for those extra hours that we would have to provide for care that the daycare wasn't able to do.
Could it not be part of the contract with the provider that they have to accommodate this, and maybe the 2-hour extension would be a kind of a compromise to allow for safety and to allow for parents to maybe accommodate an unexpected change in the schedule?
That's something that would be addressed in the contract when you're setting up with them. For example, for them getting here, if there's a snowstorm, an ice storm, and we're shutting down early, and they're going to come from wherever they're at to get here to be able to do the daycare while our staff and our teachers are leaving.
Would they be able to get there
Right.
if there's a storm
We
already
have to-
brewing?
we put that in there that, okay, 2 hours after,
Yeah.
you know, but then who's there to watch the children? I just caution.
No, I
Sometimes
agree.
logistically, that does create a problem.
Do you happen to know how other districts handle that? Are you involved in any of that? Okay. I mean, we've been providing, or we have been providing, we've been allowing providers to do the after-school care traditionally, and we are doing it now. So I wonder what they do when we have early dismissal, and I'm not aware of what their policy is. So perhaps I should look into that with the Lehigh Valley Child Care. I think they provide at one of the buildings, and I'm trying to think of the other provider.
I think we contact Alton Festival do this.
And they provide their own, so.
Alton. I could call them and get an answer to that. Although without fussing, they don't have as much experience with closing doors, but it does happen. So, would you take care of finding an outside to close doors?
I think we should have administratively, they ought to look into this too and pull some, both 503, 3Cs, as well as some for-profit organizations and see how they handle it. Pull.
So do you want to leave this open, then, this policy, until we get some more information to finalize? Okay.
Seems like we're getting closer.
We're getting closer. Maybe one more meeting? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the next policy. The next policy is policy, 903, public participation in board meetings. I know, Frank, you had concern regarding that. So with the presented policy that we have here, are you okay with the way the wording is?
I absolutely do agree with the wording. Just in the top second paragraph, public comment should be limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise specified by the board. So that's still where I'm at with that 3 minutes. That's my only issue. I'd like to get rid of that 3, bump it up to the 5 that I mentioned before. But everything else, I mean, it outlines in green what the president could do in certain situations and different things. So I like the wording. I like the whole policy. It's just I'd like to see that time limit increase from 3 to 5.
I would support Frank's recommendation.
How does everyone else feel about that? We move it forward, change it to 5. Anyone adverse to it?
Unless otherwise specified by the board. So yeah, I have a little bit of concern with
You
it.
feel like it's
I think
bigger
3
now?
minutes is adequate without question. On some topics, we might want to go a little longer, but that would be specified by us. And I think we can recognize if somebody's extremely nervous to be a little bit flexible. Just a couple comments.
One option that you, I apologize, one option that you could put in there is you could add a provision that allows them to make a petition, maybe to ask beforehand and explain why they want to be granted an extra 2 minutes.
I mean, and Mr. Ryder, understand what you're saying. My issue is, who determines what topic is worth 5, what topic is worth 3? We might see something that we say, we'll give you 3 for that, but to a person in the community, they might feel more passionate about it and they want 5. So I think that's causing problems if we decide as a board, well, we think this topic is more important, so we'll give you 5, but something else will give you 3. So I don't agree with that. I'm back to 5 minutes again.
I think with the language on the presiding officer, there's no harm in going to 5. Because following the shall be limited to, say it's 5 minutes, or it was 3, unless otherwise specified by the board. That's the board, not the presiding officer, so then it seems mechanically unwieldy and unnecessary that we're going to have to debate this every single time.
I would agree with you on that point, because I've been on the other side of the fence at the podium, asking for extra time because I had to read somebody else's statement first before I had my own comments. They cut me short because I took too long on the other person's statement. So, yeah, I would agree with you. In the debate, I lost the debate.
See, you have personal experience.
So, put it for a vote with a 5?
Make a recommendation.
Okay. So, we'll make the recommendation to the entire board for the 5 minutes. And leave everything else the same. There's no other questions on any other portion. Okay. Next policy. Policy 701, facilities planning, which has specifically naming of facilities in that, which is what we were looking at. Does anyone have any comments regarding that?
I think we open a dangerous slope when we start getting into naming until you get to the point. I think it opens other doors for us if we do naming opportunities based on a fee schedule. You have a lot of people, personnel, and other people in the community that do many things for you and everything. And if you start to name buildings after them or classrooms after them, where does it stop? You have 10 teachers in one classroom and they say, let's name a classroom. You have other people that are philanthropic in their ways. And I think with other things that we're trying to do, looking at the philanthropic end ends up being a better way of looking at it and coming up with a fee schedule of some kind, saying if you want to have a building named, a field named, and I think even that you have to look at and think, gee, Cottingham Stadium, would we want to call that by somebody's name, or does that remain Cottingham Stadium? That's the door that you open up and you have to think about as you go down the line. So I think more importantly would be at some point the fee schedule would be appropriate.
Any other comments? Also, I wanted to bring everybody's attention. Did everyone read the Salisbury Township policy? That's an example that Erin had attached. That's a policy, a naming policy that has been formulated quite well. I also want to draw attention to the fact that the reason why this was brought to the board at this time was specifically because there was a request for naming at the high school, not at the high school, the middle school auditorium. So I just wanted to bring people up to speed to remind you that that prior request is part of the reason why this is before us right now.
And I think if I can chime in here too, if you look at the Salisbury Township policy, it is very much more like a contract language. You know, it has the transferability clauses, it has the, the revocation clauses, things like that. I mean, that's really in terms of, long-term, thinking long-term, especially since you're facing these now. Districts are facing these issues. One of the reasons that it's come up is because of the economy, and it's almost become a commodity of sorts. So right now, the only change that we made, I believe, to your policy is that we prohibited naming after living individuals. That's the very bare minimum of, I think, what a truly comprehensive policy on this topic should include, and that would, preclude situations like some of the events that are happening now at Penn State, where they're having issues with naming after an individual and then something then happens. You can do it otherwise, and I think the Salisbury policy gives you an example of how you can do it, where you can revoke the name if such and such happens, and there's a process that they go through to vet the candidates and that sort of thing. But I do recommend that the board really consider, lengthening and making more explicit the terms of the names.
Any other comments?
I'm in favor of leaving it as it's been modified. I think we can go at least one more budget cycle before we have to consider the 7-page Salisbury Township option.
So, Bob, if I understand what you're saying, if somebody has been deceased, then we could name. That's the modification.
That's the only modification.
You could consider it.
So therefore, the request that came before the board at our last meeting would still be a negative.
Correct.
I have problems even with the thought, even if they're deceased, because again, you look around here, and we have many people that did a lot for music out of the high school and everything, plays and everything. We had Mr. Fox out there for many years and everything. Gene McClay, okay, with Rouge Antoinette and everything. And you have to start considering that list, and where does the list stop, and where does it start, and how do you determine? Now, if one of them comes with $1 million, that makes a different determination.
Well, you know what, I was gonna say something about that. You can get in a situation with this, for example, where it says naming facilities after living persons is prohibited. And you get in a situation where, suppose somebody comes forward with $3 million and says, I'll give you $3 million for Cottingham Stadium, but I want my name on it. Are you going to say no? Now, that doesn't, we could come up with something.
That's Bob's point, correct?
That's exactly. That's why when you put a policy together, you're going to say these are the options for naming, and you would have a discussion whether you want to include Cottingham or not include Cottingham. To include the high school, not include the high school, or is it just classrooms? And so you may exclude something like that and say that is something that is a sacred cow per se, and you can't touch that item. You have to go on to something else. And there's certain items that are per se protected.
Well, I always think about, in modern day sense, think about Liberty High School. It serves, the stadium it serves 3 school districts, Freedom, Bethlehem Catholic, I think is paying rental, but Freedom and Liberty, so 2 school districts. Guy comes along and says, I'll put the field in, I'll improve the lights, I'll handicap the stands, all I want's my name on the field. And they did it. It's Burcott Field.
Hancock Field.
Hancock. Hancock Field, whatever the rest of it's called.
I would agree with your comment. And waiting gives us less and less of an opportunity to have those offers come across our table. Who knows, there might be someone waiting for an opportunity to donate money that would be a tax deduction for them or help them in their taxes or whatever, and we might be missing opportunities here and now. Many times people are considering it in their estate plan, so to speak. So that we might be potentially eliminating those possibilities if we don't address it now. Do people want to look this over a little bit more and put this on maybe a meeting after, the next committee meeting to look at it a little bit more formally, or wait?
I have a motion just to let it stand the way it is, that you don't do any naming and that we don't get involved with it at all.
So you don't want to consider what you recommended?
No. What I think is, I'm saying with this policy, let it go the way it is, saying that we're not naming anything. I think a whole set of policies or a policy that has to deal with naming, and we can use that one, or we could, yes. And we can talk about it, because if you want to name, that's where you want to come in, where you get your tax deduction, as you mentioned, and everything else. And I think that's a whole structure that has to be built. And I think that should be put together.
Salisbury is 701, so it would
Yeah.
have to be within that
Yeah.
700, it would have to be 701 point something.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but under naming facilities, wouldn't we just look at maybe fee structures and other options for
You
naming?
probably could expand the one we have here and
Yes.
change it around to that.
So I think maybe our best interest would be to, I guess,
Yeah.
table this at this point in time and to look at maybe a fee structure and options for naming. I agree with Mr. Banko over there, or Burkott, or whatever.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody will step up to the plate tomorrow, but I think we should look at those things.
You never know.
Again, I think that's something that maybe administratively you can pull together some concepts of, because there's even different prices from what I've seen already for what you may contribute for a high school room as compared to an elementary classroom. Table it until the information can come forward, that they can pull together numbers. Again, I think some of this falls on Mr. Simonetta as well, and I think we have to be considerate and concerned about where we are budget-wise, and how high a priority this has as compared to the budget and everything, so that it's not something that may just linger out there on hold for a couple of meetings.
Right. But if we have it on in the back of our minds as they're going through the process, we need to be
Yep.
thinking about those numbers and considering what they might want to put in the policy, and then we can share that with Aaron. Okay. All right, so it'll be on hold, and the next one is policy 303, employment of administrators. I don't know if there's any questions regarding this. Basically, what was added is at the end of that policy. Are there any questions with that, or concerns, or would you like to leave it the way it is? The way this is stated, the board actually gets to interview the one candidate that the superintendent brings back before it goes before the formal board for approval of hiring.
I have a question. That's the board, so I guess the entire board?
Or those of the board that choose to attend. I would assume that it's left open, that's the way it's worded.
I mean, is there any benefit of, let's say, a couple of individuals to the board interviewing or being in on the interview for the one person that's going forward? Or is that kind of just a waste of time? They should be in the process from the beginning, maybe not the whole board, but a couple of individuals from the board maybe should be in the process from the beginning, as opposed to just the process when there's only one person left.
Well, the concept was that there'd be about 3 people coming forward, not just one. And so the board would see 3 people that meet the criteria for the position, that the administration is comfortable with, so that, they may have a number 1 candidate, but after that final interview, number 1 could become 2, and there could be a new number 1, so that any of those could work to the, would meet that criteria. So that may have to be adjusted slightly, but it was for 3.
Okay.
This particular policy, the way it's written currently, with the rewrite at the end, states one candidate that comes to the table.
The only thing, if I could comment, Madam Chair. One of the things that we have encountered is our trying to justify our process with regard to potential discrimination claims. I know that the hiring process that we have has been modified in the last couple of years to address some of the issues we had here. Is directed towards, in large measure, not only finding a qualified candidate, but being able to substantiate that through the method of the selection process. I mean, very frank with you, if you throw a couple candidates in front of the board, you're going to destroy that whole process. It's going to basically take away the defense that we tried to build to any discrimination. Unfortunately, this district has had more than share. So before you think about putting 2 or 3 candidates out there that will essentially undermine the process that's been built in to ensure that the candidate that you're presented with is come here as untainted by any discrimination as possible, or at least improvable discrimination because the process was followed. Yeah.
On the legal standpoint, how can we do it to where if they only bring one forward, and a representative of the board are not in agreement with that choice? Now we have to start all over, repost, and do the whole
I guess.
So there's no other legal way.
Well, there's a legal way, but I'm saying, this discrimination suits are not good. And the way that we can defend ourselves against it, not only us, but any employer, any public employer in particular, is to follow a strict protocol of an interview process that relies on the method that's prescribed. And I can't remember exactly how we did here, but given the issues that we have had over the last few years, that process has been honed down to try to eliminate discretion that's outside of the criteria that has been defined. And to bring 2 or 3 candidates in front of the board and say we'll pick one, that kind of undermines all those efforts.
Can we bring the representatives from the board at the beginning of the interviewing process, as opposed to just waiting until the last one is picked?
I'm being frank with you. The more that you interject the board in this process, the greater the potential issues are going to be. And one of the things that I promised when I got hired here is that I was going to do everything I could to eliminate the kinds of litigation that we had. And so that's why I feel strong about this. Certainly it's your prerogative to do it. It's the board's prerogative to do that. You can interview people. If you want, you can bring up 2, you can bring up 3. But what I'm saying is that there is a downside to that, and that is that you do destroy the structure that has been created underneath to try to ensure that we have a candidate who's not only qualified, but who is the product of a method and a process that can be defended if it's challenged. And now this policy just applies to what level? It doesn't apply to, it certainly doesn't apply to the commission level. But again, that's, from my perspective, mine's not the only perspective, of course, but given the history that we have had here, that has been a concern, and I can tell you that becomes difficult if you have 3 candidates, let's say, for example, and one of them is a particular ethnicity or race or gender or what have you, and the other ones get picked. There's always becomes a question as to why that occurred, if in fact they were more qualified. Again, I'm not saying the board certainly is a prerogative, but you exercise that prerogative in this case with a price, and that is, undermining the process to get there. So I want to just give it some
Mr. Pinbone, what Mr. Freund has said is consistent with the training we, I think, recently received. I would further go that one of the things we're paying our administration to do is to recruit and select qualified candidates. I would suggest that we let them do their job. If we have an issue with that, then we have an issue with the administration.
I agree. It was just the last meeting we brought up by the board to have mentions about board members sitting on the interview. I personally don't want to sit on the interview. But it was brought up. If you were just going to have the board members sit on the final interview, I don't see much benefit to it. Just let it keep going the way it's been going.
I think the only benefit that I would see to that is that you, as a board, would have more of an opportunity to see what that candidate brings to the table, so that when you go to the board meeting, you're more informed as to what you're voting on as a candidate. That would be the only advantage I would see to that. Is that you would actually have an opportunity to have had a moment of speaking to, asking questions that would be pertinent to you as a board member, and see how they respond. Therefore, you go to the board meeting, you're more informed of who you're voting for and why. Or if you choose not to vote for that particular person, you have substantial reasons as to why you choose not to, not just... That would be, and I'm just saying, that would be the only advantage I would see to us having that. And to me, that would be an advantage in itself, but...
I agree. I think that is an advantage. To be part of that last individual or whatever, to look at that selection and know that, hey, this is a qualified person. I just think to be involved with that is positive. I think it only enhances what we're doing in the education round.
And you're talking distance for clarity purposes, just the last person.
The way it's written here, that would be...
That wouldn't defeat anything to say, but they want you to punch off a choice of potential.
So should we move this forward the way it's written here to the full board meeting? Everybody in agreement?
Yes.
Okay. And let's see, the last policy that we have posted here for discussion is 806, child student abuse policy.
I'm going to just provide a little bit of an explanation, and I know that you received a little bit of a written explanation prior to. There is the reason for the impetus for the change here is the policy does reflect what is known as the Child Protective Services Law, and all of these definitions, it looks kind of striking that they're all stricken. But the reason that they are stricken is the district employees have an obligation to report any suspected abuse. It's not up to the district. The mandated reporter law really defers to the district employee. We're not responsible for figuring out whether the abuse fits into these technical categories. As of 2007, we're not even expected to know whether the abuser fits into the technical categories. So these categories are still accurate under the Child Protective Services Law. They just don't necessarily apply to what we're doing as a school. So by eliminating them, we've broadened the category of potential abuse violations that are reportable, and I think that that's a positive thing, and I think it's necessary as a school district. It's my understanding that your administrative staff has already done that. The practice of the district is to over-report and not to stick within these technical categories, but I would like to see the district's policy be reflective of what the practice currently is, because I think that the administration already has a good handle on, let's over-report these types of incidents, but I do want to see the policy reflect that as well. One of the other changes that was made. And you'll notice on page 3, essentially we're still notifying the public and employees of what the general categories are. Again, we're just not having them specify, if they feel it fits into that category or could even potentially fit into that category, then that's fine. Another thing that we are adding is a written procedure requirement. I think that this is also very, very important to have something in writing that is distributed to all employees on how they report and what they report. And then the last thing that was a modification is the discretion of the building administrator to report even what ultimately is viewed as non-abuse type situations, but situations that could eventually lead to harm of any threat of the safety and welfare of the child at all. Even if it isn't falling into these child abuse situations, if the administrator receives it. Again, I think your administrators are already doing this, but we want the policy to reflect that best practice of the district. So that's kind of just a summary of the changes and why they were made, why we feel that they should be made. Again, there were very limited things that are contrary to the Child Protective Services Law, just because there was a change in 2007. So there were a couple of areas that needed to be changed legally, but I think that there are some legal recommendations here that I think are really, really good best practice ideas.
So considering that, as you read through this, which I'm sure everyone did before the meeting, are there any questions regarding these changes? Or suggestions or concerns that we should put it on hold? I like what you've done, bringing it forward in a very, creative fashion so that people, with no question mark in people's minds, I think that that's a positive thing in this policy. So, unless there's objection, I'll move it before the board. Okay. And then we're open to hear the public on any policies on this agenda that we have been discussing. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I've commented a million times that you've got many, many things on your plate, and a building principal or a senior administrator would be darn foolish to put one more thing on their plate called daycare. You need to do your job well. But let me contradict myself. There are two important reasons to put it on your plate if you're looking at a $7 million budget problem. Number one, if you aggressively pursue a partner of daycare operators, I can come up with several schemes by which you could begin eliminating kindergarten teachers back to half-day and eliminate teachers after school for various activities and farm them out to low-cost providers. I'm not saying it's a pleasant job, but I'm saying it can be done and be done aggressively and save a lot of money. If you have an anti-union posture, it works. You need to consider it. Number two, there are people who have said you can make a lot of money, profit, by operating these centers. And I want to focus on the word profit that's above the line. I believe that to be true. And you have a monopoly on location. And I don't know how to translate that monopoly into hard dollars, but I can translate it into soft dollars. And I'm not talking about somebody who's going to Wall Street. I'm talking about an everyday teacher who earns $40 an hour right in your contract, and you save her money time in the morning and time in the afternoon. And I'm suggesting you probably get a $20 premium per student per day over and above cost by properly and aggressively pricing it. Now, before you start counting your money, I'm going to remind you, you've got about 200,000 or 100,000 of back bills you haven't bothered to collect from existing daycare providers. So if the past is a predictor of the future, you ain't never going to get there. So why don't you fix the past and then project the future? Look, 501c3 is nice, but they're no more enabled to do anything than anybody else is, and I can make a case where they've got some operating efficiencies where they could put more on the bottom line than somebody else. And the differences are so small. Let me suggest a complete level playing field for everybody, and let your administrators go forward in that. But last but not least, your contract's not ready for prime time yet. And I know you have a problem, but there's nothing in there about drug testing, okay? And the word employee in the context of outside vendors should include independent contractors and volunteers, because your personnel manager may be very straight. Some other people, and I can tell you that one who's very creative about bringing in outside independent contractors and volunteers. You don't want that. Last but not least, you can bring in people for 89 days right out of jail and bypass some of the tests or by the under 21. I don't think that's what you need, but I don't think we want to be a rehab center for somebody else's activity. So we want to close that stupid loophole that's in there. And last but not least, I commented on protecting your client against liability. Now, you're not going to get into a taxable status, that's unlikely. But you may lose $50,000 to $80,000 of state subsidies by getting into the daycare business. Now, if I'm wrong, that's fine. But if I'm right, your client should be protected, so you pick up the phone and say, gentlemen, here's a little ladder to your bill, send us the extras. And what I'm referring to is you're going to lose money on the state subsidy for transportation, because you're not transporting the students. There's a moral and ethical problem in billing for a service you don't provide. And I'll let the Attorney General address it if necessary. And it's about, I don't know the number, maybe $4 a day per pupil, the bus subsidy. But multiply $4 a day per pupil out by a couple hundred days a year by a couple thousand students. You just lost a lot of money. Not free. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Okay, so, is there any other comments? In conclusion, we are going to bring forth to the board at our board meeting, policy 903 with the 5-minute change. We're going to hold on the policy 707.1 for further investigation. Hold on policy 701 for the time being and go through the thought process of building and naming. And we are going to bring forth 806, child and student abuse, for a vote. Is that it? Yeah, 303, did I miss 303? Sorry, 303.
Okay, very good, thank you. And before I turn this over to Mr. Pinnabone, I have an update to share with everybody. Join us. During a tour of some of the facilities this past week, it became evident to us, being some of the board members and administrators, there was quite a bit of work in various buildings to be accomplished. By the previous board, it was indicated about doing the work in stages at Paxenosa School for the summer of 2012. After walking through the building, it would appear that the most prudent way to proceed this year is with the boiler replacement and with the masonry investigation. While that work is being done, the board can review the needs of our facilities. Working with the administration, a plan on what needs to be done, as well as the various steps, and then the consideration of financing will be created. Some of the intents from a timeline perspective would be to have a plan around the May-June timeframe. Discussion with the board, then depending on some decisions besides discussing at committee meetings, would be to hold a public meeting at one of the buildings involved for explanations and presentation. The timeline being developed would hopefully have some phases of a plan starting the summer of 2013. As other determinations develop, we will hold additional meetings in an effort to keep everyone informed along the way. At this time, the administration, in conjunction with Dewey, will be drafting specs for bidding the boilers and masonry studies for Paxenosa School. We will also be moving with the bids for Phase 2 of the approved roofing project at the high school. Once the bids are received, we will review them at a future committee meeting. Just wanted to update everybody on that because I think that's critical based on previous items that were discussed. With that, Mr. Pinnabau, all yours.
We're going to move into the Buildings and Grounds Committee. I'm going to start off with some information on the 811 Northampton Street building. I'm going to ask that we keep this topic in committee until the March 20th meeting. There was a little mix-up in communication with the Cottingham Committee, and Mr. Glickman, the architect, is not ready to present his findings as we originally thought today. As well as when the state grant came in for $5,000 that State Representative Freeman secured, it couldn't come directly to the district. So the city had to intervene and middle in that grant for us. If we were not to allow Mr. Glickman to present his findings, the city of Easton would be on the hook for that $5,000. And I'm almost positive we all agree that that's not what we want. So with that being said, I have spoken numerous times with State Representative Freeman, Mayor Salpanto, the architect, Mr. Glickman, and they are aware that our next committee meeting is March the 20th for them to present. So Mr. Glickman has told me he will be ready. He actually will be ready to present the end of February, but with we had to move our committee meeting around. He will present March 20th. Again, I made everybody aware, Representative Freeman, Sal, and Mayor Panto, and Mr. Glickman know that March 20th is the date that they have to present. This way, the city will not be on the hook for the $5,000 grant, and the community will be able to present their findings, so we as a board can make an accurate vote the following month. That's all I have for 811 at this time. If there's any questions on 811.
Yes. Is there a possibility that he could present at the board meeting the 28th?
But it would have to go to committee first, right? For the discussion. I mean, what's the protocol on that? I was under the impression it had to go through committee, be discussed there, and then put up to the board.
We were trying to keep it that way. This is an exception that we want to, because that could be a lengthy discussion.
It could be a lengthy, but I personally feel because of the length of the discussion, from hearing from people from the community and the presentation that he's been putting forward, I think it would be better suitable to keep it at the committee meeting, which would have been, I want to say, the beginning of March, but we had to move it on the 20th.
I don't know if he would be actually ready to do something on the end of this month, because that was what they shared with us at the 811 community committee meeting. That he still has to put together the report and then present it to them so that they are ready to bring it to us. So I'm not sure if that would be ready.
Right. I mean, Mr. Glickman told me he was ready at the end of February. However, I told him we would do it at the beginning of March for committee, but we moved the committee back. So that would give him more time to prepare, and give the group more time to prepare.
All right.
Any other questions? Letter B is the Haxenosis Summer Projects Update, and for that, we're going to go to Mr. Simonetta.
Okay, well, Mr. Fano indicated that the recommendation would be to move on just the boilers at PAX for this summer. There's a good possibility they may not make it through next heating season. And also the masonry investigation, orders coming in, not from the roof, but through some of the areas in the masonry. And I put a letter from Dune Engineering in front of you on your desk this evening, indicating estimates for that investigation. It's in 2 phases. The first phase estimate could be $12,000, and then based on what's found in the first phase, phase 2, which would be more in-depth and more concentrated in the trouble areas, would be approximately $30,000. And the other item for what we're calling the summer projects is we've had on the radar the phase 2 of the high school roof. There are, some serious issues with that portion of the roof that were planned to be addressed, and Henry can just give a brief presentation on the areas to show you where we're addressing. If you recall, this past summer we did phase 1, and now we're looking to do phase 2. Well, how do you know what? I don't have that presentation.
That's all right, that's fine. She's putting
Okay,
it
I'll
pulling
send
up
it.
right now, so it's like
Great.
4 slides, so we're good. You can go right to the first slide. Just wanted to give a brief recap of the phase 1 work. Right now, the final payment is pending the closeout documentation, which we're waiting for. As soon as we get the warranty and operations and manuals, we'll go ahead and finalize their payment. A budget recap of that first area of roof. The estimated costs were $1.4 million. The actual costs, including fees, not contingency, because of course the project is finished now, so contingencies have been zeroed out, was just under $1 million. The area replaced there was just under 50,000 square feet for a cost per square foot of $19.99. Just to give you a brief idea, the decision was made by the board to replace all of this roof shown in green last summer. This summer we are planning on replacing all of this roof in orange. In our discussions with Mr. Simonetta and Mr. Case, there were 2 small areas of roofing off on the end that we have added as alternates just because of the condition of those roofs. They were not originally scheduled to be replaced, but after looking at them closer, they look like they need to be replaced, so we're adding those as alternates. There is an area in the middle here called Area F that was scheduled to be done next summer with these blue areas. We pulled that area forward to this summer just to make the phasing and staging of the project a little more economical for the contractors, and so that when we finalize the roof, we're not going over older areas to get it done. So you need to go ahead. The current budget for what we're looking at, the estimate for this phase of roofing, the area being replaced is just over 30,000 square feet with that 8,000 square foot alternate. The budget for all of that, which is the base bid plus the alternate, is $911,000. That cost does include fees and a contingency for an estimated cost of about $23.35 a square foot. That's it. So, any questions?
Will it be the same contractor that did phase 1?
Nice. Hopefully we'll get a good pool of contractors to bid on it. So.
I have a question. John, walk with me on this one, okay? Pull me back if I have to. I just have a question, but when it comes to contracts and things, Henry and Mike, and anybody else who can offer input, is there a way on an RFP, when we put the RFPs out, that we can put a stipulation in that whoever gets the contract can hire a few people within the Eastern Area School District? Briefly, I know when Shiloh built their church, the big church, when they gave the contract to C2C, they asked that you hire at least 5 people, whether it be laborers, whatever, from the community, people that are not, people that are not working, that have some experience, give them a chance to earn some money. We have a lot of people like that. Is there a way we can legally add that? And I'm not looking for a PLA. I'm just looking for ordinary people from the community that have a chance to. We're doing all these jobs. If we can get people from the community who need a job, that we can maybe give them a job during some of these projects. Is that legally?
Well, I guess the first issue, Frank, maybe more practical, in that these positions are for the most part very skilled.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean the roofing. Yes.
Well, yeah, right. I'm not saying like roofing, but I mean like labor positions down the road. Is that something we can look at?
Well, let me say this, that I certainly think that we can look at what, if anything, can be done. I mean, I'm not sure that, in terms of an individual, so, you have to hire X numbers of individuals, because, again, it's basically skilled labor. I suppose that we could, do something that would have them make some efforts to hire, local labor. Then again, it depends whether or not it's a union job.
Right, well, and I'm not
Union
even
job
looking at the
or-
PLA per se, with the unions, I'm just talking about, we have tons of people in the community, taxpayers, education, whatever, don't
I
have
really
jobs.
think that this is an excellent opportunity for Henry and Arif to take me to lunch.
Wait a minute, I brought it up, I want to come too.
And why don't we talk a little bit about, see if there's any possibility that something could be structured. I don't, know how precise.
Right. Just something we can look at, there's a lot of people in the community looking for work, we can help them out.
It's certainly worth looking at, and I think it's worth some discussion and find, what the opportunities are for the Eastern School District to do something like that. I'll tell you though, this question has been asked of me in different school districts. Generally, I think you're heading in the right direction. Unfortunately, it's prevailing wage, okay? You're required by law to pay prevailing wages. So even if it's union and non-union, it doesn't matter. So you've got that issue to contend with. You've got all kinds of liability issues. You've got all kinds of insurance issues and all kinds of other things that you have to consider. So I think it's worthwhile discussion. I won't discount it today. I think it's worthy of discussion. I think it might be a little bit difficult to implement it for this project.
Well,
based on our
absolutely,
timeline.
with roofing things, I know that's more of a skill.
Okay, so, but I think it's worth discussion further and then report back, with Mr. Simonetta, back to the board.
Certainly worth a sim.
Absolutely.
I know Dr. Muscati has a question.
Henry, on your last slide, is there a reason why the Phase 2 estimate per square foot is 20% higher than Phase 1 came in at?
No, other than the fact that, we try to estimate at a certain cost, and also the Phase 2 cost has a contingency in there as well. Like I said, that it was, taken out of the first, zeroed out of the first cost, because you don't need a contingency once the project's complete. So.
Is your normal contingency more than 10%?
No, it's usually about 5%.
So you expect that number to be closer to $20?
No, probably, yes. Yeah. And of course, that all depends on more bidders, how much competition, or all those types of things.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry. Do we have any more questions about passing those summer projects?
Just so, we're looking for the board with a consensus to move forward with quoting for the masonry investigation, doing the quote for the masonry investigation, as well as to bid for the boilers and the Phase 2 project.
I think after this meeting, basically, unless there's objections here, we don't have to wait for a board to take a vote on that. It's just that you're going to move ahead and bring the bids back.
Bring the bid, and that's what we actually.
Yes.
Okay. Letter C, Excavation Services Award. Again, Mr. Simonetta.
This was an RFP that was sent out back in late fall, and this came about when we had that sinkhole in the track, and we thought it would be prudent to go out and do an RFP for emergency excavation services. Not saying we're going to have a lot more sinkholes, but other issues as well, to enable us, if something does come up, we've already bid it, we have a low bidder, and we can move with that vendor for immediate repair. And we're going to look at approving, the letters were attached as a primary vendor or a secondary vendor, which is Imperial and Scott as the low bidders on that project. So that would actually come to the board meeting in February. If the consensus is to move forward.
Any questions on letter C? All right. We're going to move to letter D, cost estimates for field lights and tennis court renovations. Again, Mr. Simonetta.
Well, this was a request for the last athletic committee meeting to talk about get some numbers for lights at the field, high school, and also for repairs of the tennis courts. And no small numbers, as you can see in the information, but the lights we're looking at an estimated project of $200,000 to $225,000. And with the, I'm sorry, that was the, that was $200,000 to $225,000. On the tennis courts, we're the range, depending on how much you want to repair, from just a basic repair to complete redo, anywhere from $55,000 to $325,000. So, again, with the financial constraints and everything else, but there's some safety issues with the tennis courts. There's some scheduling issues and other issues with the practice fields. Is there an appetite to move forward with actually going out and bidding these two projects to see if we can obviously get a better price, but to see if we want to make these repairs?
When it comes to the field lights, I just want to remind everybody, it's not our idea to change it, it's PIAA changes the schedule. So that's why we're lacking in field space for our children to play. Just because I was bored last week, I looked around in the community just to see if there's any places very close to the school that we might be able to utilize facilities for soccer. There's absolutely nothing. Everything at that time is taken from the time we get out of school till 9 o'clock at night. So there's essentially no other place for our team to practice with lights. Any comments on letter D?
I wish we had done it when we put the deal in.
The tennis court's a mess.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how I played tennis on it for the last couple of years after I went over and looked at it.
There's a priority to the tennis courts right now. They haven't been repaired since, Mr. Case, 1991, something like that. We look back.
When the soccer starts? August?
Beginning of August.
So you're saying that the tennis courts is a priority, so you would make do without lights?
I talked to Coach Hall and Coach Sain, the two new soccer coaches. We worked out utilizing the Shawnee Elementary field. Behind that, a middle school field, and then two teams at the high school. One team using the outside of a baseball field. There's a grass in the outfield they can use. They can use that to practice. We can make do for a while if we had to. It's not a long-term situation, because obviously a soccer team practicing on an arch baseball field, you have a square field and a round peg. So we can make do for a year or two without lights, but down the road I think, again, we're losing out on a lot of time of not utilizing turf. So our maintenance guys are lining all these fields, and man hours and money to do that and cut versus the lights. So
Can I, Henry, maybe you can help me out with this. I don't know that option one is worth considering as just a temporary fix if we're going to do it. And I would do probably do option two, which is the middle of the road.
But that's only going to last for a couple of years, and then you're going to be doing it again.
We can also bid it out both ways. The middle and the top of the one.
My suggestion would be to defer the bidding on the lights, as we heard, and to get all three options bid for the tennis courts.
The tennis courts are used daily for physical education. It's not just athletics. Unfortunately, I had to bring it here, but they do use it daily for athletics. It's a big part. Even this time of year when the weather's decent, they're out there using it. So it's not just for the tennis team.
Do you have any other comments for D? Letter E, proposal for intercom and sound system for the Easton Area Middle School, grades 5-6.
We have some issues at the middle school with communication. And I guess the swing rooms, the between the two buildings. Originally, they were set up, we might have it backwards, but for 7-8, and now they're being used as 5-6. And that may have changed. The way the intercom system is set up, it's not easy or almost impossible to communicate and change 7-8 to 5-6. So if there's an emergency with the 5-6 area and the swing rooms are set up for 7-8, we're only going to get the 7-8 announcements. And we did have that issue earlier on this year. We had a modified lockdown, and that section did not hear because it was the wrong side of the building. So what we're looking for, we got a proposal from CSI, who was awarded the contract to do repairs of $1,900 to make this fix. So it's just a flip of the switch. At any time they need to go between 7-8 communication and 5-6 communication. If that made any sense. And the other issue is the gymnasium in the 5-6. When the addition was put on, I don't believe the PA systems and communication with the current gym was addressed. And right now there's no PA system in 5-6. And again, accordingly, no communications in case of an emergency situation, intercoms, and the like. And Tim, you can help me out there if missing something.
Yeah, when they renovated the two buildings, we really didn't give any thought that the 5-6 gym was going to be used as heavy as what it actually being used. So when it was renovated, we did not install a PA system in that gymnasium. Therefore, they do not get the announcements during the day, and then they do not have any way to announce any events that go on in that gym. If we installed this, that would give them both of those areas to take care of PA announcements and for whatever events go on there.
When that was the old building, Mr. Case, did they in fact not have any kind of communication going to that gymnasium? I mean, that gymnasium has always been used as a gym for gym classes, so.
I think it had an amplifier system in there because they used it for basketball and things like that, but with the addition of the new gym on the 7-8 side, it was felt at that time that that gym wouldn't be used in that way. However, we found out later on, since we opened the building, that obviously they do need an amplifier in there to announce events that go on there. But the main reason is without that amplifier, of course, there's no speakers in the gymnasium, so they do not get the daily announcements either.
So how did they get the daily announcements before?
When it was the Shawnee Intermediate School, there was an amplifier in that gymnasium.
So where did that amplifier go?
That amplifier was taken out with the rest of when they remodeled. I don't know that amplifier wouldn't have fit the new system that's in the building right now. So when they demoed a lot of the areas in there, that was taken out also.
And that wasn't part of the current plan that they had in place to replace that or anything?
I don't think there was no plan at that time that they were going to use that gymnasium to the source that they use it now.
So it was excluded from the plan?
Yes. And that was one of the first things that both Henry and I had looked at to make sure that it wasn't included. The fact that the gym on the other side is a much larger gym, felt that all the events were going to occur there. That's why it was left out. But obviously the PA system is used by the PE teachers during the day and then events at night.
Yeah. Not for middle school athletic events, but for their assemblies they have,
Right.
those types of things during the school day. Yeah.
Tim, who was the architect on that?
I'm not sure who actually did the engineering of the sound system and things like that. But
Well, that would have been the architect though overall. Who was the architect?
probably was Spillman Farmer.
The thing I find odd, and I mean, obviously we can't do anything about it now, but it just seems odd that school is a school. It's always been a school. The gym has always been a gym used by gym classes throughout the day. That wasn't considered for this purpose. It's just bizarre.
Yeah, what was in that building before, if I could just speak to this, was in that building before was an analog system where you had the old-fashioned intercom system. When they rewired the building, it's now a digital system that CSI, I guess, installed. But I guess there was a decision made at that point not to outfit digitally that gym for whatever reason.
It was probably to save money so they could spend more later.
It just doesn't make any sense to me. Absolutely no sense. You have students in that building, in that area, and you have no system.
I agree with you.
that-
But somebody had to
Safety-wise-
make-
Safety-wise, across the board, absolutely no sense.
But somebody made the decision, well, we don't need to do this. But then they found that, now we found that, people found out, whoever, we do need this. Well, now we have to do
Well,
it.
you know, and here's
Costs
the
more.
issue. That building has been in existence the way it is right now for over 2 years. How many years have you been in that building as the sixth middle school building? Way over 2 years. So we just now are addressing this? I mean,
If I may, it's actually been requested to be addressed previously. I'm saying we need to address it now.
But it never, I know for a fact it never came before the board in the
Right.
last 4 years. So administratively, did you hear about this?
I just found out about this as well.
So you're not aware of this issue? To me, this is a safety issue. This is bizarre.
That's why I'm requesting to move forward. What I'd like to do, requesting the board, is to take care of the intercom in the 5, 6, 7, 8 swing, and get some another couple quotes for the amplifying system for the gym.
Yes. No choice.
Any other comments on the letter? All right, do we have anyone from the public who would like to be heard on any of the agenda items for buildings and grounds? Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Mr. Bidwell. I'm Kurt Ely. I live on Monroe Street in College Hill, and I'm a member of the committee that Mr. Pettibone was referring to. You're aware of that. It's the committee that has been evaluating the 811 Northampton Cottingham School. I just wanted to take a moment to highlight a couple of things. We met on January 31st most recently. There were 2 school board members that participated in that meeting. In addition to those individuals, State Representative Freeman participated, Mayor Panto, City Administrator Glenn Steckman, City Director of Planning Becky Bradley, City Council Member Bob Pino, Westward Neighborhood Partnership Director Esther Guzman, additional staff members of the Westward Neighborhood Partnership, Community Action Committee of the Lehigh Valley Executive Director Alan Jennings. We're talking about not community members in the typical sense. And I wanted to make sure that you understood that. We're talking about a group of people who are very serious about this building in the community. They're working very hard to try to figure out ways so that this building can be kept within the community's use. I believe very firmly that it belongs in the ownership of this district. And I found it only every day almost that goes by, my belief in that is reinforced. I found it striking that on Friday, the most important banner headline in the Express Times indicates very, very clearly, for those unaware, that blocks in our West Ward house fewer diplomas, high school diplomas, than in other areas of our entire valley. More West Ward residents having graduated from high school than most other parts of the valley. More than 1 in 4 residents of Easton's West Ward do not have a high school diploma, and in some specific areas of the neighborhood, as many as 1 in 3 do not have a diploma, according to the United States Census statistics that were provided in our last census. It emphasizes, goes through a little statistical study here, but then it says, a couple of paragraphs down, but the worst area, not just in Easton, but compared to neighboring communities such as Bethlehem, this is incredibly important, I think, from 10th Street to 6th Street along Northampton Street and its surroundings. There, 64% of 3,500 adults have graduated high school, and only about 5% hold bachelor's degrees. 1/3 of the population in the blocks that in either direction of the 811 building that we're referring to comprise that worst area or one of the worst in the valley. There is one other area in the Lehigh Valley in Allentown that has worse statistical data than that. I share this because that building can be used in ways that provide education that are so important to every other component of education that you're involved in. If those parents were able to read, if they were able to take seriously education, as I'm sure many of them would like to be able to do, if they were able to take courses that help them with their high school diplomas, there'd be an opportunity for them to instill, to I think, a better degree, education within their children. And that makes a difference in the Easton Area School District. We're hearing about test scores.
Mr. Haley, if I could ask you to go well over the 3 minutes already.
I apologize. I just felt that this was incredibly important and that I wanted you to be aware that we are moving forward with the study we're doing. The items that Mr. Glickman is going to provide are not going to tell you about how much money it's going to cost to fix this building. The study that's being done is for other purposes, and it will be very informative. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Hopefully the presentation, when you get it from the community group, will be the best thing since sliced bread. But if it is not, I'd like to plant a couple other seeds with you. And that is, one of your prior real estate deals was done by an attorney who knew less about real estate than I do, and less about bonds than I do, and that's really dangerous. You left 95% of the money on the table. So I'd like to suggest to you that you've got some really skilled people on board, a solicitor, a chief financial officer, who presumably know their way around, and that you should consider a private deal, and that you should consider holding the paper under extremely attractive terms to move it forward if, in fact, another project does not go forward. And I can explain in more detail why that works. But the net long-term benefit to the district works best if you come up with a creative way to put it back into service and encourage somebody to build it up. And I'm suggesting you've got the two team members to do so privately as opposed to in a fishbowl, which limits all of your options. I, for one, don't see it as being owned by the West Ward. I see it as being owned by the entire school district, and the net outcome has to be to benefit the whole district. Now, either way, as long as there's a large benefit, I think you're satisfied. And I'm just saying you need to think about Plan B in case Plan A does not move forward on a very prompt basis. I don't know how better else to put it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else that would like to speak about anything on the Buildings and Grounds agenda? All right. We're going to move to a summary. Letter A, 811 Northampton Street building. We're going to hold, we can hold here in committee until the March 20th Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting. Letter B, Paxinosa Summer Projects Update. We're going to move the full board to the end of the month. Letter C, Excavation Services Award. We're again going to move to the end of the month full board. Letter D, Cost Estimates for field lights and tennis court renovations. We're going to move to full board at the end of the month to get complete bids for all the options. Letter E, Proposal for Intercom and Sound System for the Eastern Area Middle School 5-6. We're going to move the full board for the end of the month. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Two adjustments really, not to the full board. Mike, you're just going out for bids, that's it.
Right.
That's what you're right.
Yeah, the timeline will get us in for the end of the month, but we'll go on the March.
Okay.
Are you getting bids on those just for Just for clarification, any bids on the lights also? Or did
No,
you
I
decide
thought we're
no?
gonna hold off on that.
Okay, so it's just the one item?
Just the tennis
Not
court.
eligible, right.
Tennis courts and the intercom and sound system.
Right.
Those bids go out, and there be a time frame put to that, because tennis season begins Monday, August 13th, 15th, whatever that is. That'd be very important to have that done. I don't know of any local area courts that we'd be able to use in the fall if that was to be available.
And by all means, if you have any other timelines or something, just shoot me an email, so I can forward it to.
Sure. Okay, under finance, like to make some introductions?
Yes, Kyra. Kyra is one of our auditors from Palmer and Company, and she's here to present the 2010-2011 school district audit.
I believe everybody got a copy of the draft budget, the draft financial statements last week. This is the exact same report without the draft watermark stamp on it. Nothing has changed. Want to briefly go over the financial statements. Please feel free to ask questions as I go along if you would like. I'm going to start on page 13, which is the statement of net assets. Go over a few highlights. As of June 30th, 2011, the district had in its governmental activities approximately $35 million in cash. Add to that another 16 in investments, which is more or less certificates of deposit that come due in greater than 3 months. Also on your statement of net assets is where we list your capital assets. The capital assets of the district are approximately $187 million. Moving down to the current liabilities, that's where we get the items that have to be paid over the course of the next year. There's $2.8 million in regular accounts payable, about $8 million in long-term debt, though there's more to be said on that in a little while. Also, the non-current portion of those debt is approximately $129 million. Down at the bottom in the net assets, the district's net assets include $51 million that are invested in capital assets, a little shy of $10 million that are currently restricted for capital projects, and $18.5 million that is unrestricted. This represents the full accrual financial statements of the district. The following page is the statement of activities. A couple of highlights here. The expenses for just instruction totaled $83.6 million this past year. That's approximately 64% of the district's budget. That was cover the total expenses of the district for the governmental activities is approximately $130 million. The cafeteria fund, which is your only business type, was another $3.5 million in expenses. Those expenses were covered in the cafeteria fund by service charges and by federal and state grants. For the governmental activities, $75 million was covered by the property taxes, another $10.5 million in taxes for specific purposes, in particular for debt, and other unrestricted state and federal grants of another $22 million. All told, in your full accrual statements, the district was in the red by a little over $500,000. It gives you a total net assets at the end of the fiscal year of $79.4 million. The next page starts the fund accounting, the fund financial statements. These are the ones that you're more familiar with on the modified accrual basis. This is broken out into general fund, capital reserve, and your capital projects funds. Again, you'll see about $35 million in cash, so it's very consistent with the full accrual statements. Highlights from this statement is under your liabilities, you have accrued salaries and benefits of about $12.3 million. That is up about $1 million from the prior year. And most importantly on this page is the changes due to GASB 54. GASB 54 states that we change how we list out the fund balance of the district. It is now broken down into 5 categories. The first is non-spendable. Those are things like your inventories or any prepaid assets. The next is restricted. These are items that are restricted by outside sources, such as debt covenants. The next is committed. Those are money set aside by resolution by this board. The fourth category is assigned. These are items that are set aside by your chief operating officer or in prior years the business manager. And then we come down to unassigned. Those are the monies that have no restrictions on them at all. The district has $1.5 million in non-spendable. Those are your prepaid assets. The restricted assets are in your capital projects fund. That's $18.9 million. That's bond monies that have been set aside for capital items. The committed amounts by the board are another $4.5 million in your capital reserve fund that was set aside previously for other capital items, and $2.1 million that was set aside for use in the 11-12 budget. The assigned items, if you want to take a look at that, are on page 44 of the notes. That amount that has been set aside is about $5 million for capital equipment and other projects, $3 million for health insurance stabilization, $1.5 for other post-employment benefits, and $3.4 million for PSER stabilization. We all know the PSER's rate is going up tremendously. This money was set aside to handle that. Going back to page 17, this is the income statement, if you will, of the governmental funds. Overall, in the general fund, and only the general fund, revenues were $129.5 million. Expenditures were $134 million. And overall, the district had a deficit last year of $4.4 million. That brings the total fund balance down to a little shy of $20.5 million. Page 19 is the budget comparison. It lists the original budget, your final budget, the actual, and then the variance. As you can see, revenues ended up about $200,000 shy. Expenditures were about almost $3.4 million over. So all told, with budgetary transfers and transfers out to the capital reserve fund, the district was about $2.6 million shy in its budgeting last year. The following pages are more on proprietary funds, the cafeteria fund. One change for this year for the cafeteria fund is indirect costs were charged to the cafeteria fund and credited then to the general fund. That being said, the cafeteria fund still had a profit this past year of $36,000. Revenues for the cafeteria fund were slightly higher this past year, not much, but slightly higher. And operating expenses were also roughly the same. Page 22 is the statement of cash flows. If anybody wants to look at that, that shows where the money came from and where it went out to. Page 23 is the statement of net assets for your fiduciary funds. These are your scholarship funds and the student activity funds. Overall, in your scholarship funds, $235,000 was received in donations, and a little over $45,000 was given out in scholarships. The one last thing I want to talk about is something that happened quite recently that I know Mike is going to be talking about shortly. You have refinanced $20 million worth of your debt. So the number that I gave you before, as far as the principal amount due in the coming year, has changed. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it saves about $1.8 million for the current fiscal year. So you can drop down that $8 million to about $6.2 million. So that's an improvement for this year.
I think it's going to be about $800 this fiscal year.
For this year and $1 million
for
next?
this year.
So that should help out with the debt expense for the current year and the coming fiscal year. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions? Thank you.
I'd like to thank Kyra and Paul and Company for the long process and a lot of information. And if there's questions after, by all means, please feel free to give me a call and we'll go through the numbers. It's a lot to absorb in a 10-minute presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, this will be on the agenda to accept. in 10 minutes.
Mike, last
The post-issuance bond compliance services. With the refinancing, there have been the new IRS regulations we were apprised of. We have to monitor the arbitrage. And I got that information from Kevin at Mr. Floyd's office. So we went out, reached out to our financial company for a quote to provide the services and write procedures. Part of the requirement is for the district to have written procedures. So they will, they're presenting for $5,000 to assist us in writing the procedures and do the required IRS monitoring of the arbitrage.
So that'll go into the agenda
That'll
for
go
approval.
in, requesting that to be on the agenda.
Any questions on that? Update on the budget?
Not a significant update on the budget because we haven't had the meetings to make any drastic changes. But what I put a worksheet in front of you, and I just want to bring to your attention, we all know the deficit, we all know our estimate on the gap that we have. And I just wanted to lay out for consideration, and I'll also say that moving forward, meetings are going to occur probably every other day. We start looking at areas and start, as soon as they start, put it down on paper. We've already been talking about it. But I wanted to show you as a big picture, in case this hasn't been shown before, that we don't have a lot of areas to go to. It's going to give us significant savings, not the amount of money that we need. And the first category is the so-called, on the last column I put ability to change or cut or make adjustments. The first category, debt service, obligated leases, technology leases, other budgets such as the IU, CIP, the county, the library. That represents almost 20% of the budget. We can't touch those. The next category, salaries, benefits, which include medical, pension, Social Security, and the tuition as part of the contract, the tuition reimbursement. That represents almost $94 million, or 67% of the budget. The only way we're going to be able to do anything with that is through staff reduction or contract revisions. The next area, what we call a little area that we can adjust, and the key word there is little, representing only 2% of the budget, which is other insurances and utilities. What can we do there? We can take a guess and gamble. And fourth area is substitute costs, overtime costs, and athletics, representing, again, a modest 1.3% of the budget. Again, if we do anything with athletics, program changes or reductions in the numbers. Substitutes and overtime, that was cut for this year. That number is low for this current year. How much we can do there, or how much we're going to get compared to the deficit, will certainly be questionable at best. So you look at those four areas, and that represents just a little under 90% of the budget, leaving us with the area of supplies, books, dues, fees, professional educational services, software, travel, field trips, building maintenance, repairs, transportation repairs, maintaining the equipment we have. A little over $15 million. So, again, the gloom and doom that I hate to keep doing here is just to make you aware of where we're starting from and where we have to go and how we have to get there to bridge this budget gap. And if you have any questions, please.
I think Governor Corbett made an education proposal this week, if not today. Have you had a chance to look at how that impacts our assumptions?
The assumption is the draft budget that I presented before was based on flat basic education funding. I did hear it during the speech, but I did hear later through an email that the accountability block grant funds were going to be cut. The good thing for Easton is that those funds were not, we did get those funds this year, but they were not counted or anticipated as a revenue. So that's no net loss for us next year. And that's all I quickly got out of the speech. So it doesn't change our revenue picture. I guess that's a good thing. It's interesting that we're in a position where we're happy with flat funding.
Other questions? I think your intent at this point is we're going to continue to talk about some of the others, but really drill down on that 15 million to see what, and that's what's going to come out of your meetings with the various areas.
Well, and other options in the other areas.
Right.
Understand too, and I'm sure you all are aware, that 15 million, that has been looked at every year. And I looked through the books on what was spent the last few years in those areas, and it's going down each year. And we're at spending levels from 2008 to 2009 in those areas. There's not much to go. I looked through some of the minutes and some of the books from last year, and I understand there's a lot of time and effort put towards that 15 million. I think it realized $89,000 of savings or cuts. But again, now you're back down to spending levels of 3 years ago. So, but yeah, everything's looking.
So we'll see more details
Yes.
as the time goes on.
Yes.
Other questions?
Relative to this budget proposal and kind of reflecting back to the audit report that we just heard, am I reading it correctly that in the previous 2010-2011 fiscal year, we overspent the budget by over $3.3 million? Am I reading that right?
That's correct.
What controls, or where do we stand on the current fiscal year?
As I indicated, I think, last meeting, I'm concerned with the actual budget, expenditure budget approved for the current fiscal year. I think with our obligations that we have in hand, we're going to have to overspend. I don't think enough was budgeted to meet the demands of the contract and the demands of what we're spending. And if we go into cut or do a budget freeze and stuff like that, I still don't think that's going to do anything, because most of that area is in salaries, the benefits, and the supplies. We're not going to, even at this point, a budget freeze is not going to get us there. How much over, I don't know, but I think we're going to have to dip into that under $4 million surplus that's left to cover this year. As far as the controls that are in place, we've already started implementing every account looked at, any purchase order coming that's in a negative is getting turned away. There's some issues about certain areas of the district that aren't even aware that their accounts, their individual accounts are overspent. We're implementing those controls, we're changing all that.
Mike, as I've mentioned to you before, I have big concern with how we're even controlling the budget. To say that we go over by 3.3 million and we're going to go over again this year by some unknown amount, kind of makes a sham of a budgeting process. What does a budget really mean then? And this is not directed at you, but for the district's purpose, what does the budget mean?
And let me just qualify. The estimate about going over is based on what I anticipate the necessary expenditures are. The reason why I don't know is because some of those revenues are a moving target. If we get a lot of those revenues, it's not going to be a severe hit. That's also a question. As far as what does the budget mean, I can't answer that except for myself moving forward. It's going to mean we're going to budget what we're required to budget, what we need to operate the district.
And until we get to a point where, on a monthly basis, this board can see line item by line item where we are relative to what the budget is for that year, I would say we don't have sufficient control to make smart decisions.
I can't argue with that. And those monthly reports are being worked on. Because, as an example, salaries. We extend the salaries as we pay them, as opposed to encumbering at the beginning of the year. We're working on it. That's so before you get a report, it's going to mean nothing to you. All that's going to be implemented. So we're going to see the exact picture of where we're going to be come June 30th.
Other questions? Hearing none, I'll open the floor to the public. Mr. Anderson.
I'll save the war. I can't find you a couple million, but I can comment on a couple 100,000. You all know that you have got unbilled and uncollected amounts to a couple of your tenants in your buildings, and some of your previous administrators have said they were inhibited from collecting them. I'm suggesting that you allow your managers to do that which you challenged them to do by your own policy and go get your money. But more to the point, I'm amazed at auditors who continually don't know what they're talking about. And I brought a problem to your auditor's attention personally, discreetly, a couple of years ago. I brought it to one of your business managers' attention. And rather than address the problem, they put more garbage on top of it and went away. The problem is basically this. For decades, you hired useless tax collectors who didn't do their job. Instead of collecting the money, they ignored their job and then took the delinquents and put them in the garbage can. Your auditors refused to address the process, your management refused to address the process, and I'm not suggesting you dig up the debt. However, many communities do make money by going after deadbeats. And in this case, by statute, there's no limit as to how far back you can go on taxes. That's not the problem. For all of your tax collectors except one, you bought performance bonds. The bonding company never got off the hook because nobody ever completed the process. Now, it's a legal nightmare to go through the steps to put the bonding company on the hook. But I assure you, the bonding company was never closed out because not one of your tax collectors ever took the oath that he completed his rounds. And that's in the Bible, so to speak. If you don't do your rounds and come back and deliver the goods to Caesar, Caesar cuts your head off. The modern version is if you don't come back, deliver it to Caesar, the bonding company steps in with a performance bond and pays up. Well, your guys never came back and swore under oath that they did it. Now, this is old news, and it's not something you'd be aware of, but the point is, there's a couple $100,000 out there collecting mold. I'm not smart enough, and I don't know if anybody is, to get the mold off and get it back in your coffers. But even if you got 20 cents on the dollar, that's 20 cents more than you had yesterday. And the bonding company is not some little old lady. They're some company, for profit, sitting out there fat, dumb, and happy. So we might as well go pick their pocket, if possible.
Thank you. Any other comments? With that, the quick recap is, item number 2, the bond issuance bond compliance services will be on the agenda, and that is the only item moving forward. Everything else will remain in committee.
The audit will be...
Oh, the audit, I'm sorry, the audit will also be on the agenda. Thank you. With that, that concludes the committee meeting. I will ask now for any general comment on any items. Yes, ask me. State name.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Dr. Michelle Jeffrey-Vinci. I'm a professor at Lafayette College, and I live on West Lafayette Street. But I'm here tonight because I'm Julia's mommy, and she turns 6, 29 days after the September 1 cutoff date to enter public school. I'm here specifically in regard to policy 201 concerning admissions of students, and the board is all or in part in receipt of a letter stating a request that I know that Dr. McGinley had kindly read and shared with the board and with Mrs. Leonard-Ellison. I will briefly read that letter. I do have a copy of it if you're interested this evening, and it states, and it's signed by myself and 12 other parents who are affected similarly. We write with a request, Dear Superintendent McGinley, Mr. First. We write with a request regarding ESD Policy 201, admission of students. It recently came to our attention that as part of the November 9th, 2011 revision to the policy, the district has eliminated admissions testing at the first grade entrance level for students educated in the state of Pennsylvania. Our children are currently enrolled, those that are undersigned on this letter, in the kindergarten program at the Lafayette College Early Learning Center. This is a full-day kindergarten program that is certified by the PA Department of Education. For many of us, the decision to enroll our children in this program was predicated on our understanding that admissions testing would be available if we wished to enroll our children in the first grade in the district in the following year. This understanding was based on a discussion held last year by Early Learning Center directors Mrs. Susan Lavelle and Mr. First, who indicated at the time that admissions testing would be an option for any student who successfully completed the kindergarten program but who did not turn 6 prior to September 1, 2012. However, as a result of the unpublicized change in Policy 201, a change that occurred midway through this academic year, and about which we as parents received no prior notification, our children are now precluded from testing into the first grade. And in light of the above circumstances I state in this letter, we respectfully request that a one-time exception be made for our children and for all those children similarly affected, such that admissions testing would be made available this year for any children who successfully complete a certified kindergarten program in which they were enrolled prior to the change in admissions policy. I want to thank the board and Mrs. Leonard-Ellison for considering this, but I'd like to urge you also to consider this with dispatch, because April 1, according to the prior policy, was when we would have had testing for our children, and obviously that's coming up very shortly. And 2, I'm going to need to make a decision for my daughter. I'd like to enroll her in the place where I'm paying taxes and where my older daughter's coming to school, and we're very happy with her experience here. And I'm hoping that 29 days on her birth date and those who are similarly affected will also be taken into consideration, and that you'll look at this with dispatch hopefully by the February 28th at your next committee meeting. And there's my 3 minutes. Thank you.
I could have saved you just a little bit there. Actually, I have to apologize for the administration not getting back to you. There is consideration, and they are reviewing this currently to come back with a recommendation to the policy committee at the future meeting. I thought it would happen tonight, it did not, so it should be here for the next one.
The next one, the next committee meeting, maybe the
Yes.
standing committee?
Yes.
That would be in March.
Yes, on the 20th.
Okay, I thank the board for your consideration. Thank you.